Croeso i gyfarfod ein bwrdd. Fel aelod o'r cyhoedd, gallwch fynychu'r cyfarfod i arsylwi. Mae hynny'n golygu y gallwch weld a chlywed y cyfarfod, ond ni chewch gyfrannu. Rydym yn recordio'r cyfarfod a bydd cofnod ohono ar gael ar ein gwefan yn fuan. O ganlyniad, gofynnwn i chi beidio recordio'r cyfarfod os gwelwch yn dda. Welcome to our board meeting. As a member of the public, you can attend the meeting as an observer. That means that you can see and hear the discussion, but cannot participate. We intend to provide a video recording of the meeting, which will be available on the website soon after. For that reason, we ask that you do not record the meeting yourself, please. Cadeirydd y cyfarfod heddiw yw Cadeirydd yr Ymddiriedolaeth, yr Athro Donna Mead OBE. Mae 6 aelod annibynnol arall gan y bwrdd fel y gwelwch o'r wybodaeth ac gyflwynir. Today's meeting will be chaired by the Trust Chair, Professor Donna Mead, OBE. As you can see from the slide, the board also includes 6 independent members. Yn ymuno â nhw, mae aelodau bwrdd gweithredol y Ymddiriedolaeth. Joining them today are the Trust's executive board members. Croeso hefyd i rai o'n partneriaid allanol. We also welcome some of our key external partners to today's meeting. Mae'r bwrdd yn gyfrifol am reoli perfformiad a strategaeth yr Ymddiriedolaeth. The board is responsible for the strategy and performance of the Trust. Cadeirydd yn agor ein cyfarfod yn awr. The Chair will now open our meeting.
Bore da pawb, a croeso cynnes iawn i chi gyd y gyfarfod hwn. Good morning everyone, and a warm welcome to everybody to this meeting. This is the public board meeting of Velindre University NHS Trust for March 2023. You're all most welcome. You've been informed that the meeting is being recorded, so for staff and members of the public, the recording of this meeting will shortly be available on our website for you to view at your leisure should you wish to do so. We have a mixed mode of attendance today. We are here present in the boardroom of our headquarters, but we have several colleagues joining us virtually. So as usual, it'll be quite a task really to make sure I pick up on everybody who's wanting to contribute to the meeting. So for those who are joining us virtually, can you use the usual mechanism of pressing that you want to contribute to the meeting, and Lauren, board secretary, and I will do our very best to make sure we don't miss you. That usually works very well, and around the table, you know, just raise your hands and I will call you into the meeting as appropriate. The meeting, as we all know, is being recorded and it will be available on the website. So if I can then go to 1.10, which is apologies for absence. I've been made aware of the following apologies. Steve Ham, Chief Executive, and thank you to Carl James, our Acting Chief Exec, for continuing to act while Steve Ham is away. Nicola Williams, Executive Director of Nursing, Allied Health Professions and Health Scientists, who is represented by Tina Jenkins today. And Tina, welcoming you into your interim role as Deputy Director of Nursing, and wishing you very well in that new role. I'm sure you're going to do very well in it. Stephen Harris, our Vice Chair, and Vicky Morris, Independent Member. Those are the apologies that I've received. Does anybody have any other apologies that I'm not aware of? No? Thank you. If I can go then to 1.20, which is who's in attendance today. So first of all, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to some of our regular attendees. Stephen Allen, Chief Officer of the Community Health Council for our area. And Stephen, I understand that you're going to be with us only for a short time this morning because you've got another commitment. And this will be your last meeting with us in your current role as Chief Officer the Community Health Council as we move into the new setup of Llais going forward. So on behalf of the board at this point in the meeting, Stephen, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for being such an excellent ambassador for the public and representing them and their needs to this board, and for the very constructive way in which you've worked with us over many years, and that we've come to regard you as very much a critical friend and also as a colleague. And to wish you very well, Stephen, in your new role going forward into the new organisation. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say thank you on behalf of the Community Health Council and the public and residents of Cardiff and Vale and the wider community across Wales for your the excellent working relationship we had with you over the last 49 years that we've been around for, this Community Health Council been around for. Llais will continue, will start as of tomorrow, as of the 1st of April, and I look forward to re-engaging with you with my new role from the 3rd of April onwards. But thank you very much indeed. I'm going to thank everybody on the board as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And so you just, you log off when you're when you need to go, but thanks for joining us this morning. We also have with us this morning Emma Rees from Internal Audit. Is Emma here? Oh, Hillary's just joined us, that's great. Well, we're expecting Emma Rees. Kate February, Audit Lead for Audit Wales. I've seen Kate, so I know Kate is here. Stephen Wyndham, also from Audit Wales, and I've seen David Cogan, our Patient Liaison Representative. And then as the meeting progresses, we will be welcoming Alan Prosser, Director of Welsh Blood Services, who's attending to present and talk to the Welsh Blood Service 5-year strategy. Phil Hodgson will be joining us. He's our Deputy Director of Planning and Performance, who's going to be attending for agenda items 5.20, which is the integrated medium-term plan, and for the Q3 update for the existing integrated medium-term plan. So we'll welcome Phil and Alan as we get to those agenda items. So 1.40, I hope I haven't left anybody out. If I have, somebody will point it out to me, I'm sure. But I think I've covered everybody that's joining us today. Are there any declarations of interest pertinent to the items on the agenda for this meeting which should be declared, please? No? Thank you. If we can now then go to 1.5, which is the action log. So this is the action log for the meeting of the 31st of January, and colleagues, you will notice that all items there are closed. Am I in the right? Yeah, so both items in the action log are closed. Is everybody content with that? Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I'm content that they are closed, but I would like to raise two issues, if I may, in relation to 7.20 and 7.10. So 7.20, Jazz, I'm going to look at you, give you a nanosecond warning. This is the Cardiff Cancer Research Hub, and I just want reassurance, Jazz, that as we finalise the heads of terms and have the legal appraisal, that there is mention in there of the branding of Velindre within the whole setup. Yes. That was one of the concerns that we raised at RDNI, and we've raised it previously in this board.
So, I mean, certainly the branding, it's not necessarily, do you mean it's referenced in the heads of terms specifically? Because I think we have signed up, so there's commitment to branding of Velindre being recognised as we are developing the branding currently, and that will come back to us for scrutiny and approval. So there is a process. I mean, I don't think we've made necessarily, that.
So that decision isn't made yet.
No. So that is happening currently. There's a process to which we are collaboratively agreeing on the branding, and I think Velindre has got a particular stakeholder. And don't worry, I'm watching it very closely to ensure that we are comfortable with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So and presumably the branding will be finalised before we agree the heads of terms.
Right. So that we're close to their drafts in motion at the moment, and that will have to be agreed prior to formal sign off of all three parties.
Thank you. So that's the assurance I was looking for. Thank you, Jazz, for that. And then in relation to 7.10, and this relates to brachytherapy, and the action as set out there is complete, and you will see that brachytherapy is in the risk register later on in our papers. I spoke with Nicola Williams yesterday or the day before yesterday about this issue, and I'm sure she will have briefed you as well, Tina, which is that the Trust commissioned a review into brachytherapy services, and we've had that report of that review. It's been in the organisation now for some time, and I know there's been a lot of activity to work through the recommendations of that report and so on, but I'm concerned that we have sight of it as a board, and I've been assured by Nicola that it will come to the next Quality Safety Performance Committee and then to the May board. So we will all be cited not only on the report and the recommendations that it made, but the action plan that will sit alongside that. Will all come to the next cycle of meetings.
Yes, together with the progress that's been made so far as well.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm just concerned that we had sight of the original report, which as a independent members we're very keen to see that, and we'll get that now in the next cycle of business. We haven't approved the minutes yet because of the way. Oh no, we have. So I went ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So the minutes 1.4, I went ahead of myself. Apologies, colleagues. Are we content to approve the minutes? Gareth.
Thank you. I have a point of accuracy, please, on page 3 of the minutes.
3.
And it's item 2.1.4. Says the trust approved the amendments to the trust board standing orders. It should be the trust standing orders, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you.
So by way of explanation for me just missing out on that, then we've agreed as a board, which we've informed you previously, we agreed in our board development sessions that we would put some consent items towards the back of the agenda to give us more time to, and while we're fresh, to discuss some of the more substantive items. And that's why I just missed that then. So are there any other corrections for the minutes, please? Martin.
There's one 224 on the same page.
Sorry, Martin.
224 on the same page, page 3. It says that the highlight report of the audit committee in January will be circulated outside the meeting. It's actually in the consent bundle today, so we put it here today.
It doesn't mean the minute's not correct, or does it?
No,
Put it as a postscript.
The minute says it will be circulated outside the meeting. They would circulate outside the meeting. They're here on the papers today. The minute isn't correct.
That is what we said.
That's what we said at the meeting. Yeah, so this was a postscript. Yeah, which I'm happy to note as a postscript.
Yeah.
To that. Thank you, Martin. So if there aren't any other corrections, can't see any hands up, we'll accept these as an accurate record. And then before I move on to the next section, I would just like to ask, are there any matters arising which from these minutes which weren't included in the action log, which anybody would like to raise now, please? No, I think they're more or less captured on the agenda. Thank you. So we go to section 2 of the report, which is that's my report, the chair's report, which is there for you to read. had some very busy board development sessions, including sessions, developing the board as a unitary board and as working as a collective. We've had some very important and useful sessions there. We've had a session on compassionate and collective leadership, which was led by Professor Michael West, which I don't know what feedback you've had, Sarah, but I thought that was an excellent session. I didn't think it was going to be an excellent session, I have to be honest, but it turned out to be a very good session. So that was extremely helpful. And I'm sure the members of the public colleagues will know that in recent couple of weeks, there's been an Audit Wales report into governance at Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board. It's had a lot of publicity. And we agreed as chairs of NHS Wales that all of us, all NHS organisations would, we would have done it anyway, would look at that governance report and use it to hold a mirror up to ourselves to to appraise where we are in relation to the recommendations and the content of that review. And so we held an extraordinary board development session in which we looked in detail at the Audit Wales report and its recommendations, and we made our comments, between each other, and we recorded those, and we were given a kind of template of themes to consider by the chair, Anne Lloyd, who chairs an Iron Bevan University Health Board, and so we collated our responses in relation to that thematic approach set out by Anne Lloyd, and then we sent that in to Anne, who first of all, we circulated it amongst the board, and then we sent it into Anne Lloyd as chair of chairs, and then she collated the responses of all NHS organisations in Wales, which she's forwarded to us, and I believe that's also been circulated. But correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I haven't seen that yet.
All right. Well,
can
we'll circulate it then after this meeting.
Great.
I have it.
You have it. Great.
Yes. Apologies if I haven't got round to. I haven't had it for long, but I have seen it.
Yeah. Great.
So I will forward that to you.
Yeah, and we'll circulate it,
Lauren, and then that can be circulated. And it was a very valuable discussion, and we took great comfort from a number of ways in which we've been working, but we also drew breath and said, are we absolutely sure about some areas? So I think this will be a piece of work to be ongoing, that we will continue to look and review our performance. And so we will be having some further meetings in relation to that. So I'm not sure, but if anybody wants to ask me make any observations in relation to that report, but we have done some detailed work just to assure ourselves and the public that we've taken that report very seriously ourselves. Just like to note Andrew Westwell, I should have noted him in apologies.
He's just joined, actually.
Oh, Andrew, you've joined us. Are you still in Delhi?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit late.
I'm amazed that.
What time is it in Delhi, Andrew? Out of interest.
Oh, he's gone. No, he's there.
It's 10 to 3. I'm plus 4.5 hours, and still wondering what the half means. It's very strange, but I'm 4.5 hours ahead.
4 minutes 25.
Anyway, what I wanted to note for the committee is that Health and Care Research Wales announced that all NHS organisations in Wales that have appointed one of their non-executive directors to be the voice of research and development on their boards. And following discussions with Andrew, he readily agreed to be our board champion for that purpose. And so the details of that are contained in my report. And I think there's a link there that you can. Do I need to stop?
Yeah, I don't think you're muted. Can you hear us? Right, thanks.
But yes.
No, sorry, we just, yeah.
Kate, are you muted?
Yeah, sorry, I've literally just joined the meeting. We've been having problems with getting into Zoom this morning.
All right, I thought I saw you earlier on, but perhaps you've been back in and out.
Yeah, I got kicked back out.
Okay, so the idea is that the independent member, who's the board champion, will work closely with the executive director responsible for research, as well as the research and development in each organisation, to ensure that research is on the radar at board level and that the profile of research is increased among staff and patients across all health boards and NHS organisations. So Andrew is willingly taking on that responsibility, and we'll have a discussion, Andrew, outside the meeting about how you'll take that forward.
Yeah.
The Minister for Health and Social Services, Lynette Morgan, held an away day. It was a full away day with all of the chairs. It was a full agenda, and we were looking at, our Healthier Wales, the recent innovation agenda, and so on. It was a busy day, but as you might imagine, part of the discussions included reflections on the Audit Wales report on Betty Cadwaladr University Health Board, and we're all kind of making suggestions to the minister about how we can improve governance in our individual organisations. I meet every 6 weeks with Peter Groves, the chair of Health Technology Wales, and it's time now for Peter to come and attend the board again. As the annual report is due, and in addition to that, they've revised their ways of working somewhat. I know he's attended the chief exec's meeting, he's attended the chair's meeting, and he's coming, I think, to the July board.
Yes.
July board, so we'll welcome Peter Groves then. International Women's Day was very busy. That was on March the 8th, and there's a link there. We asked members of staff throughout the organisation if they would like to just discuss a little bit about what International Women's Day means to the organisation. That link is there for you to read. And later that week, on the Friday, I attended an International Women's Day event at the Angel Hotel, and I was one of the key speakers. The other key speaker was Caroline Hitt, formerly of Western Mail and now BBC Wales, and she gave an excellent presentation. I think I gave a reasonably good one as well. But the reason I want to mention that is what I decided to do. There is a point to me telling you this, was usually in these meetings we get spoken to by women who've excelled in business, and it's interesting and inspirational. And I wanted to turn things on its head a little bit and talk about women who achieved much in public service. So I spoke about Nicola Williams and what she's achieved from her beginnings. Nicola wasn't able to be with us because she was on leave, but she made me a podcast, which went down very well. And I took with me Sue Shepherd, who's our deputy head of operational services. Right. So Sue began life, in her words, as a pot washer, and was for several years a pot washer in a local school, and she is now head of catering and the deputy head of operational services. So I spoke about Sue's journey and how through many difficulties she's raised to this position, and the amazing things that she does over and above her role for Velindre. I didn't know, for example, that when patients, sometimes they're going home they live alone, or she prepares a going home pack for them so that they've got sufficient food for several meals, and toiletries and things. She doesn't have to do that, she does it. And she's involved if ever there's a wedding which sometimes happens when patients are in towards the end of life, they wish to marry, and the help that Sue gives towards that. So Sue attended the lunch, and I spoke about Sue's journey, and Sue got a standing ovation, and I think I was so pleased to be able to honour her and her achievements as an inspirational woman. So and I did some other women in public service. And then wanted to say that earlier this week, we had acting chief exec joined us to to meet the High Sheriff of Mid Glamorgan, Maria Thomas, to present Tracy Davis, one of our most ferocious fundraisers. She's relentless, Tracy, who has raised over £300,000 for Velindre in the last 8 years through various treks and other escapades that Tracy organises. So that was a very moving event, and Carl spoke at that event. And just also to mention Wear Red for Velindre. That event went down very well again this February, with hundreds, literally hundreds of schools, clubs and businesses wearing red and hosting red-themed fundraising events for Velindre, including one swimming pool in Merthyr Tydfil that dyed the pool red, which I thought was absolutely, it looked amazing. I'm not sure I would have jumped in, to be honest. It just looked, it did look amazing, but I wouldn't have jumped in. And then finally, this is hot off the press, and Carl, you might have wanted to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I want to offer the Trust congratulations to our own Dr. Hilary Williams. I hope I get this right, Jazz. I thought I just opened up the right place in my phone, and now I seem to have lost it. Hilary Williams has been appointed Vice President of the Royal College of Physicians, Wales.
That's right.
That's absolutely right. So can we offer as a board our congratulations to Hilary? She's been really instrumental in driving forward the arts in health agenda more recently as well. So if there are any questions or observations, I'll take those. If not, can I move us to the Chief Exec report, please, Carl?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I mean, I wouldn't say too much, but I enjoyed speaking with Tracy present, but obviously I had about 30 seconds notice, so I've had about 5 more minutes today. But no, I just the report speaks for itself. There's only two things that I wanted to highlight really. The first is on the bottom of page 2 really, and just again to acknowledge the great service that Janet gave the organisation. And now she goes on to I think it's retirement cap, isn't it? So her journey in this world has ended and she's on to the next, but it's just important that we recognise
This will mean
yes, that's what I meant. I didn't mean this world, I meant for the NHS. So please, Janet, if you are watching, forgive me. I do wish you well in your future travels and everything that's going to get on with. But also then the second part is as exciting to welcome Edwin as well. So those of us who've had the pleasure to work with Edwin and various guys know what a talented, enthusiastic leader he is, and he'll help drive us further forward. The other point I wanted to make was not in the report, and it's just about really, I think IMTP 30th of March seems to signal in my mind the end of a financial year. So I just broadly wanted to really, I think, say a huge thank you to all our staff and our partners really, because we've had again a very challenging but successful year. We continue to deliver high quality services, blood, cancer services and everything else that goes with it. But I think that is really testament to both the dedication, professionalism and an awful lot of resilience over the last number of years for everybody in public service. But I just thought, I think IMTP on the 30th of March seems to signal the start of a new year. I know it's not quite Christmas, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to say huge thanks to everybody in our organisation and who work in public services, and also to promise to donors and our patients that we will do better next year and the year after. So I just thought it was a useful chance to draw an end to this and look forward to the next. So happy to take questions on anything else within the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Carl, for stepping into Steve Ham's shoes over these last weeks. And we appreciate very much the hard work that you're doing, continuing with your substantive role and the acting chief exec role, Carl. It's hard work, and I know you've been working extremely hard. No hands up, so if I can move us please to section 3, quality, safety and performance. So this is where you really now get to see the rearranged agenda kicking in. And we're starting with our risk register.
Thank you, Chair. So the risk register, as I noted at the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee as well, is on the new paper template. So this is a bit of a trial we're doing during March, and we'll be rolling it out further in April. So we can have some time in the board development session in April just to refine and take any feedback, but that's why it looks in the way it does with the exec summary. And also important on the new template on page 2 is the assessment of the level of assurance that this item is providing. I mean, it says according to the exec sponsor, but this was actually something that we discussed as an executive management board. So it's an acknowledgement up front that we, as an exec management board, assess that this is providing a level 1 only, and that is due to the fact that the action plans for many of the risks continue to need strengthening. So there has been progress. However, the tracking up now in terms of levels of assurance needs to be clear and progressive, and that's what we continue to be committed to. Before I hand over to colleagues on the particular risks, just to outline that as it says in 4.1, in terms of the template itself, this was something that we discussed in the January cycle, and the audit committee, as it's in terms of its role as oversight of governance, risk and assurance frameworks, took the time, and thank you to the members of the audit committee for going through the template both for risk and the trust assurance framework a couple of weeks ago. So the changes that we agreed there will now be implemented through, so I'll refer to that one in the next item as well. And the other item I wanted to mention is in the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee in March, we agreed that going forwards we would have a deep dive in that committee on particular risks.
Yeah.
So as well as having this overview that we would take, we can decide how that will work, 2-3 risks or whatever makes sense each time,
excellent.
and have a proper review into the detail of those going forwards. The next steps on in 4.2 in terms of the overall framework. So the policy and procedure are all now live, and the level 1 training, which has been an outstanding audit action for some time, is live and on ESR as the new mandatory training module. So that was my summary of the overall framework and development.
So,
I'll take any questions on that or open up on the risk.
Before you hand over, I just wanted to make one general observation. I've got some particular ones to raise, but the accompanying information is very helpful, Lauren. And I'm just wondering, is that going? I mean, I haven't memorised it by heart. So will you be including that in for both for this paper and the trust assurance framework, the accompanying information which describes what various colours mean and what the levels mean?
Yeah,
is extremely helpful.
yes.
Will that always be there for us?
Yes. Yeah, it will.
Okay, so that's really helpful. It means for a longer paper, but it just means you can scroll up and down if you can't quite remember. So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So
and in a couple of years' time, we'll know it off by heart. But in the meantime, as we're getting
used to it.
Yeah.
But it is really maturing. So notwithstanding, I've got 1 or 2 issues. Martin, please.
I echo that comment. It will take a little while for us to get our heads on the various levels of what exactly that means. Yeah, we had a good conversation a couple of weeks ago to discuss this. And if my memory serves, we did discuss a little bit of changes to the individual columns in the risk register, a little bit more detail. Some could come out and a couple more to add in.
Yes, exactly.
And the important point here is this flows from the dating system. So
there's no manual interventions in this, that hopefully we have a far clearer, smoother process, and it's owned by the individuals concerned. And therefore, I'm very supportive of this process. It might take a little longer than we might have otherwise hoped, but we're there. And I fully endorse that level 1. We need now to work on making sure that the owners of the individual risks make sure they provide enough detail in the action plan. We can then monitor what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Kath?
Yes, can I just add that I think just in terms of the whole process and the flow through, how Datex is being used, the amount of detail that the staff put in is a fundamental change of ways of doing things for us, because Datex is now being used as the reporting tool, not the recording tool. And I think that's a really important differentiation. And so there's an awful lot of people that are inputting into this. There's a widespread, change. So an awful lot of this is operational detail that maybe isn't required at this level in terms of that high level actions, what we're taking, what are the tasks that are underneath. So I think there's also a difference between actions and tasks. And so we're just sort of just trying to work through with people what they look like. So yes, a growing maturity all round. I think we're
I think that's great that we've got detail. I mean, in the past we've struggled with not having enough detail, and if there's too much, we can edit out, can't we? I'd rather start with too much than too little.
Yeah, absolutely. So just there's lots of changes, but we are systematically working through it. I think is the best way of describing it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, Gareth.
Sorry, I was just going to ask on item 4.3 in the paper, and maybe you could refresh my memory about these statements we're talking about, because that paragraph isn't all that clear, I don't think.
Yeah.
Where's 4.3? What page is that?
So
It's on page 4 of 7.
Thank you.
no, sorry, I see what you mean. So this is referring to that when we agreed the change in risk appetite through the January cycle, we discussed in the audit committee, and then Quality, Safety and Performance Committees backed up what audit committee had said, which was where we were reducing the risk appetite for cautious level risks at a level 2 from a 12 to increase in the risk appetite from a 12 to a 15 for board level, that the board would still want clear assurance from the levels of governance that manage the 12 risks, which is basically the senior leadership teams at divisional level, that they were being managed appropriately. So we did have, so Alan and Paul provided statements through to executive management board, but we just felt they probably just needed a bit of tightening up because they were quite generic, and in order to provide the assurance that the exam question was asking. Well, actually, it was kind of just a paragraph for each. So we're going to template that. So it's much clearer than as a monthly proactive part of the template to say, in addition to what's reported here, the level 12 cautious risks are being managed appropriately at divisional level, signed off by the divisional directors.
Right. Okay. That's helpful.
So it'll come through the next cycle.
That paragraph didn't come.
No, sorry.
It's kind of like an attestation sort of comment by each director to say, I swear that everything else below this level is
below that level. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I've got 2 queries, and if I'm asking the wrong question in the wrong place, I'm sure you'll tell me. But I am really beginning to follow all of this now. I mean, it's been a bit theoretical, if I can put it like that. But now it's becoming alive now, and it's becoming easier to follow. I've got a query in relation to risk 2800, which is there's a risk that you have to move the water main at Asda. That's not a risk anymore. That's an issue now, isn't it? Because we do have to move the water main at Asda. So there's still risks associated with it, but it's not the risk that we might have to move it. We've got to move it.
Yeah.
And that just must be a timing issue when the papers are prepared.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but we just need to note that.
Yes.
And then
oh yeah. Okay.
For risk 2612, I quite like a bit of Jazz, maybe you can help us here under acute oncology services, oncology cover. Can we really wait until September for a solution for this? Because of the difficulties that there are with the oncology services, where you've got consultants having to act down and so on and so forth. And I was just thinking this is a bit of a worry.
Yeah, I think there's a constant focus on this piece of work, and I suspect it's moved to a different place since I'm just looking at the date this risk was updated. Because we are constantly trying to cover the gaps. We have made new appointments. We've reorganized the timetable for consultants, and we're also providing cover in Cardiff and Vale as well. So I think that it was flagged at the time, and it is one of these dynamic situations which changes because of the changes in the actual job plans and the requirements in clinic, etc. So effectively, sometimes people are rotated to be on call. That was the historic position, but you may also have a clinic running in parallel. And although you're meant to be supernumerary for that clinic, the reality is somebody goes off on leave, and so you're basically trying to do two things. And we constantly look at how we can provide more seamless cover. What we don't want to do is to cut patients, reduce the number of patients seen in the clinic, and that's the challenge. So what I would say is that I don't think that this is something that's waiting for September. I think that there is, there are some national pieces of work which will help clarify the position in September, but this is the kind of weekly piece that is being managed.
The bit, thanks, Jazz, I didn't quite understand was that this has arisen, it's on page 2 of 5, because of the new curriculum in training that includes acute oncology. Does that mean that that's put off people from wanting to train? I couldn't quite understand what the
so basically, as part of the new curriculum, trainees in oncology have to have exposure to acute takes.
Yeah.
And that exposure needs to be supervised by a consultant.
Yeah.
So historically, we were, it was reasonable for us to put trainees in that position, and they would then report at lunchtime into the AOS meeting. Whereas now the requirement suggests that there needs to be the consultant providing that education and training. And it's good practice, it's better for patients, but it's creating that cover is not easy to do. So September is when there's going to be more clarity on what the absolute requirement is. In a sense, we're in a pilot phase at the moment. But there is more and more being put on consultants. That's the reality of it to deliver.
There was associated with that is the number of emails that doctors are receiving, which is about clinical issues, about patient issues, I would imagine. That also seemed to me to be quite a. I see Kath wants to.
I think I was more moving my hand, but I can add to that. I know that there's an audit that's being undertaken.
Yeah.
So the team are actually working through an audit to really help us understand. I think we know that some of the ways of working that we had to adopt during COVID have changed the way in which we do things, but also recognising now that there's new functionality within the new DHCR that we might be able to use. So that audit is ongoing, just in response to that risk that we highlighted before.
So, Jazz, I mentioned September because that's the date that's given here, but you're assuring us that this is being managed and monitored, and which is what I was looking for. And finally, under 2389, which is on page 5 of the 5, there's an issue there about airway maintenance, and I thought, and I would quite like for somebody to talk us through that, because that seemed quite concerning to me. It's the last page of the risk that patients with altered airways may not receive appropriate care from the MDT clinical team. So, and then when you read the detailed information in the columns to the right, I was left wondering, how safe a service is this? I understand all the issues, and that there's a huge amount of training going on, that there's been an appointment of a I think it's a CNS or an AMP or something. It's on page 5 of the risk register.
There's been a lot. So this risk has been flagged for some time. It goes back to 2021. And so it's 2 years ago it was flagged. And in that time, there's been a huge amount of work, including ensuring that we have CNSs who are who are trained to manage airways. And that has certainly transformed the confidence in care. So I'm not, again, when was this risk updated?
It's due for an update soon.
There's a whole timeline of the work that's been undertaken, and then the last one is the beginning of November, 2nd of November.
And I think there is an awful lot of action that has been undertaken here. And I think this risk is due for review now at the end of April. I suggest that, given that we know that there is so much ongoing, that Jazz and I take an action to bring forward the review of this action, and then we can bring that back and update if that's okay with everybody.
Into that, Carl?
Yeah.
Okay. I think this was an important issue. It kind of left things for me a little bit, are we absolutely certain that if there's an airway problem, two sources, one is if it's head and neck cancer, and then if it is, there's two areas.
I think we need to see that risk coming down, and I would hope that the review of the risk will reduce it from 12, but we need to do that and provide that assurance.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could put that as an action. Thank you, Gareth.
I'm sure there has been some work, so from a perspective, but so I'm sure I'll highlight that to Nicola as well, and raise that to Nicola. I'm sure she'll link in with the both as well.
Thanks, Tina. Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. One specific comment and two general ones. First of all, on risk 3011, which is on page 1 of 5, it's the final one on that page. The risk is described as there is a risk the continuation of safe patient care may be adversely affected, resulting in harm. And that's quite a broad general statement. And I think it just illustrates the point that the automatic feed from Datix is good, but it depends on good data being put in them in the first place.
Yes, totally agree.
Because
absolutely
rubbish in, rubbish out. So I'd like some assurance around that specific risk, because it's hard to know what it relates to. And then the two general comments are, I think we when audit committee IMs looked at this, that we'd also include a timeline against the risk trend, so that we can understand how it's coming down, whether it's a linear one or it's in steps or whatever. So hopefully that'll be included in the next iteration.
Towards the targets or the past?
Toward, it's that right-hand column that we have.
The forecast.
But we have some idea of has it been at this level for a long time, then come down, or is it being gradually coming down?
The right-hand column does that.
The rightmost column?
Yeah, for some reason, the months, I don't know where those numbers come from.
Oh, that's really helpful. I was trying to make sense of that.
Okay. Right.
So we need to get that changed, don't we?
The line graph are the months, going back 6 months.
Yeah. What are the numbers?
They don't make any sense.
What's
No
the number?
idea.
448?
It's 6 months.
Transposition error.
Right. Okay. I want to give me some clarity around that.
Yeah.
So we understand it, please. And then the second general point is that some of these risks have been here for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I don't know what QSB, the deep dive they'll be doing, will they be doing them on the longest outstanding risks, or will they be doing them based on the severity risk?
Yeah, we haven't decided yet.
So presumably we can decide that at each meeting, ready for the next one, can't we?
Yeah.
But that's a helpful comment, which
Yeah, and I'm sorry about those axes.
take forward that to QSP, Tina, that we need to work out the criteria for selecting deep dives, and to remember to include consideration of very long-standing risks. Amongst others. Or Hilary, I can see your hand up. Gareth, have you finished?
Yes.
Okay, Hilary.
Thanks, Chair. No, I just wanted to say to Gareth on that first point that was raised at QSP, and that it was agreed that there would be an amended wording coming back to the next meeting. And I think that Vicky's intention in respect of the longest risks, of the reviewing of the risks, was to look at the most serious ones first, the highest scoring ones first. Thank you.
But from this meeting, we're asking also for in consideration very long-standing risks, because it's not one or the other. It's both, isn't it? And how many we can do in a meeting. Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Hilary.
there was some changes suggested in QSP that she didn't see that had factored into the new paper. So I think we could just go back and look at what they had recommended in the last QSP and make sure it fits to this one.
That'll be for the next government cycle
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
people review the risks. Yeah.
So are there any more issues anybody wants to raise under item 3.10, Kath?
I just was responding to Gareth's question about the risks themselves in terms of DHCR. So 3011 and 3048 both relate to the DHCR implementation and bedding in. That progress is being made, and there's an update I think really that relates to both these risks and then also the performance. If I can just give you a succinct update on where we are, because again the cycle of business means that there's been some considerable movement and development since the risks started going through the governance cycle. You'll notice in 3011, I got them the right way around, that it says, and again I think it's back to that example of maturity, we've used the phrase data shredding in there. That's not we're shredding it up and we're losing it. It's the technical term for the way in which the data moves between various of the systems that we bring together. So that was a technical issue which has now been resolved. So it was about that sort of passage of data, and the fact that it was a bit clunky meant that it was causing us operational delays. So we've now resolved that, so that will be dramatically reduced. We'd like to have a live system where the data is live across the two systems, but we're not going to be able to move to that for some considerable time. That's just a technical infrastructure issue between the systems with DHCW, but it's in the plan. So to let you know that one will be reduced. And then I think the other risk relates to DHCW in the round, and in terms of where we are in terms of the bedding in and maturity of the system. And you'll remember in our last meeting we had a discussion around the fact that at that stage we weren't able to provide the radiotherapy data because of the way in which we've made those system changes. And there's some quite considerable complexity in that. And I'm just going to try and give you the high level detail. So where we are at the moment is that we're experiencing a number of things. First of all, we had some technical issues that meant that we were having some difficulty with the warehouse. All those technical issues have now been addressed. We've got a stable data warehouse. What we're doing now is working through the validation of that data. So that work is ongoing and progressing, and we're still hoping now that by the end of April we'll be right back into the swing of reporting. There's two things will be: one, the live reporting of the data going forward, and then two is the legacy data and the validation of the legacy data and the time that will take. And we're doing some work to consider what that looks like in terms of the resources that we need. Part of that, in particular, in relation to the radiotherapy data, is that we're going to be implementing the new cost targets that I know we've discussed several times in the past as a board, and we'll be bringing you a briefing on that and what it means and our transition to those and what our action plan is against those new enhanced reach targets. So there's that. So secondly, then, I think it's in terms of our use of the system. This is such a fundamental change for everybody in terms of the way in which the system operates and billing in the different fields, and everybody's doing really well in terms of working through it. But at the moment, I think we've recognised that we've got three things. So obviously, we let it bed in for a while, and then we've done an impact assessment on the use of it. We're just about finishing go around each of the departments at a very granular level, looking at the steps in the process for how they're using it and feedback. And in that, we've noticed that there's three things really. One is that some of our software and the way in which it's been, what it looks like and what it feels like, what happens when you push a button, some of that is immature. It was created for us afresh and anew, so we're the first users of it. And although it had gone through testing with some of our staff who were the super users working on it, of course, when you get it out for wider utilisation, you encounter a greater range of people, and you get more feedback. So we know we've got some sort of clunky items in terms of that. And we worked through the proposals with DHCW, and we took that to the Cancer Informatics Programme Board on Monday, and we've got an agreed plan of action for that. So we're working through that, and we should know the timescales on that in the next couple of weeks. That's all being worked through. So the second thing we've got is some of our protocols.
It would have been really helpful to, if you feel we need to know this, which we obviously do, to have had a paper setting all this out, because this is too much for us to to take in. And I think Gareth's question was the leftmost column. It gives you no indication of what's to come in the columns afterwards, and that's because of how the datex system works. So, in relation to what you were just saying, this is something that will develop, presumably.
Yes, that is. And sorry, I'm taking too much time. I think the trouble is the information is fresh, so there hasn't been the time to turn around the paper between us understanding exactly what the. Sorry,
I'll just make a suggestion. I mean, so obviously we're close to this as an exec team, aren't we? So perhaps what we could do is bring in a paper through QSP, which provides, where we are, because as Cass said, it's a complex thing. We're making good progress, but there's still some work to be done. So if that would be helpful, I think it would.
Yeah, it would.
And then we can have perhaps a particular item on that alone, because it's such a complex piece of work.
Happy to. Yeah, and sorry, I just thought.
No.
But I thought we
You wanted to give us all the information in detail, but it's so much for us to take in.
I absolutely
That's an oral issue. That's
No, that's fine. So
in relation to Gareth's question, the issue of the leftmost column not giving us any real insight into what's to come, because it's so very, there's a risk that continuation of safe patient care may be adversely affected, resulting in harm. Going forward, Kath, that will be finesse to tell us a bit more about what the actual issue, because you would never have dreamt that was going to be a digital issue.
No, absolutely. It's back to the conversation I think we just had earlier on, which is that there's the maturity in terms of that understanding.
Yeah. So that's what we were asking for.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren.
And on the titles in particular, I mean, the level 2 training focused in on that. So the 120 people that have gone through that level 2 training have had detailed guidance, and it's set out in the procedure as to how a risk title should be structured. So that clearly doesn't meet it. So, but what we can do, which we haven't, which I think could be useful, is just to go through and just make clear which of those do now comply and which don't, and then support the owners for the ones that don't, to make sure that they are structured in that way.
Yeah, I think that's right. Somebody needs to review this risk register just to make sure that the risk is clearly elucidated, so that we know what it is.
Yeah.
What it means.
And then we know we've got some idea of what's to come. Yeah. So thanks, Cass. Sorry to
That's okay. That's fine. That's fine. I absolutely understand.
Thank you. Thanks. So in relation to the risk register, we've noted the risks at level 2016 and 15, as well as risks in the safety domain with a risk level of 12 reported in the trust risk register and highlighted in the paper. And we note and welcome, I think, the ongoing developments of the trust risk framework. It really is beginning to kind of make sense and to come together. For those of us whose job it is to scrutinise it, I welcome the improvements that we're seeing. So the next item is 3.20, which is the trust assurance framework. So I think that's again is you, Lauren. And I'm going to ask the same question again. The supporting information in this paper was extremely helpful, and I plead that we can continue to have that for a little while.
Yes,
at least.
Yeah. So to pick up on the developments of the framework and the approach in 2.1, and then as per the last item, we can then start getting into the strategic risk register itself. So the main work that's been going on during this reporting cycle is actually on the refresh of the strategic risk register, which forms the basis of the trust assurance framework. So following on from an initial discussion we had at board development in November, we have continued that work with the divisional teams, and we're bringing that together during April to come to the board in May for approval of the new risk register. So that's the content. In terms of the framework, again, we discussed this as audit committee members, with the audit committee members, and we attached the latest view of the new template because it's more. And there's some more fundamental differences going forwards than than there were on the risk example. So just for the information that's attached as Appendix 2. And then 2.1. So the other piece that's been raised as we've, again, in a next level of maturity of this, is actually in the way in which we've now got a very clear procedure and how-to guide for risk management process and data. It would be helpful is the feedback we're having to have one for the trust assurance framework, because again, it will help make sure that it's can be clearly owned and understood by all of the management teams, rather than it becoming just an exercise so people understand how it fits in. So we are developing that. And again, it was a similar conversation in QSP that we would have a deep dive on a rolling basis of the risks going forwards. So that's an overview of the development in 2.1, and then happy to take any questions. Colleagues around the table on the risk.
Thank you, Lauren. Gareth, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. You'll know what's coming, Lauren. I always ask this question about in respect of a number of these risks, the residual risk score remains unchanged since the previous review.
Yeah.
And no specific, I'm looking at tougher one as an example, and no specific evident trend emerging in the data. And if the risk remains unchanged, does it mean that the actions we had planned in order to mitigate that risk aren't working, and therefore we need to do something different?
Yes, so which is the conclusion you'd reach, isn't it? So if you, in Appendix 2, on the new template, on the second page, so that's on page 79 of your overall pack.
79. Not scrolling like mad.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that.
Yeah, so going forwards on the template, when we set actions against the risks, what everyone who owns this and fills it out will also now need to do is explain what is the impact of that action expected back on the risk, and then also when it's complete, have that trail of, well, now it's complete, how has that either impacted the risk score or enhance the level of assurance in a certain way. So at the moment, as you say, we kind of that seems to be true, but we haven't got any information to kind of look at to track back, whereas going forwards that we will do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So acknowledge your question, but yeah,
that'll be helpful. Yeah, because at the moment we've got a trend of the risks remaining at the same level.
But actions being completed. So
but it hasn't worked.
Yeah, exactly.
So either it hasn't worked or the risk needs to be reappraised and the level change. Yeah. Sarah.
I think for me, I mean, I've been doing a lot of thinking around that question, and for me, it's this fundamental difference, isn't it, between the strategic risks and the risk register we were reviewing a few moments ago. Because to me, the strategic risks, specifically 0304, which are the ones that are under my domain, if you like, they are going to be long-term impact in terms of the actions, because they're systemic. When we talk about culture, when we talk about supply and shape of the workforce, well, I would never expect to see those risks come down on that 2-monthly cycle, if you like. But we do need to be able to track the difference we're making and the fundamental underlying difference. But I think it's a longer term trend, isn't it? So to me, it's about weaving that into the process and having ways of measuring that.
Yeah, I come to in a minute. So there's a difference, isn't there, between airway management and changing the culture of the organisation. So that
when we talk about risks, we talk about them as one bucket, if you like, rather than, to me, they're fundamentally different by their very nature.
So that's
I fully appreciate that, and I accept the point. I think we just need to be clear that just because it's a strategic risk, that we don't say, oh, we're going to live with it at that level. Let's try and do something to reduce the.
Or acknowledge that it's going to be 6 months before we anticipate any
or have some way of measuring the outcome relating to the action that may not reduce the level of risk. I think.
Yeah.
So
We think of that.
Yeah, I know everyone. Just to make a point, actually, we spent quite a bit of time on this in QSP, didn't we, Gareth? And the workforce was quite a good example of that, whereby being clear about in our plans what we expect the result to be at any particular time. So a simple example was in terms of recruitment retention, actually holding our current position might be success by the end of next year as opposed to gaining. So it's been really clear about the cause and effect between the risk, the management action, and where we expect to be in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. So that we did spend a fair bit of time just working that through, which is different to the very operational risk, which we need some ALS on site.
Yeah, that clarity is really helpful.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. Okay, so Hilary, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think the Tal has covered the point I was going to make, but back to Sarah's original point, that's why it's so important to have target dates that are realistic. So you wouldn't set a cultural change to happen within 3 months. You'd maybe set it within a year, but you'd have progress reports. How are you faring to meet that target in a year? And so that's why, for me, it's important to have the, realistic target dates from the start.
Thanks, Hilary. So, Sarah, if you can continue to give that some thought and share with us how you intend to manage that. But it doesn't just apply to your particular area of responsibility, it'll apply to some others as well. That'll be helpful.
Yeah, and I suppose this is where what we're trying to do now, again, relating to the tools that I'm specifically looking at with the team, is to think, well, do we reflect more strategic actions in here, or do we reflect more granular actions, which is now what we start to do as this matures, because one will give us a different cycle than the other, if you like. So, keen to continue to work with colleagues on that and the expectation.
What's really helpful is we wouldn't have had this conversation 6 months ago. So, that although we're still, looking for improvements, we wouldn't have had this conversation 6 months ago. So I think that demonstrates that we're moving along the pathway. I can't see any other hands up. I've got one query, which I've already had assurance on, but it's a public board meeting. So these papers were made available a little while ago, 7 days ago, whatever. So I've had an opportunity to discuss my concern with Sarah, and I just want to put it on the table now, not because I've had a discussion with Sarah. I still think it's important in a public board meeting that we set it out. And it relates to the TAF dashboard in relation to organisational culture, which starts on page 15 and then goes over many pages. And you'll see there an awful lot of ambition and an awful lot of planned action and activity. The bit that concerned me is it isn't obvious. It might well be implied, but it isn't obvious. Culture is a board responsibility. And most of what's set out here is what management and officers throughout the organisation are going to be doing, which is fine, absolutely fine. But culture to work through how we set the culture is a board responsibility. And Sarah, if going forward, we discussed yesterday, this might come out through the Building Our Futures Together paper, might come out a bit in there. But if we can make it obvious, because I know that all the intentions are to involve the board as a whole. If we can make it clear in the dashboard, I think that would be very helpful.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think your point was well made yesterday, and as we discussed, there has been a further update of the TAF 04 actually since these papers were published, which now does clearly say that the board owns the various elements of work relating to values and strategy, for example, which again wasn't mentioned explicitly.
What is mentioned in here is the reporting to board. That is in there quite clearly, but this is more about the board being involved in the strategy formation for how we're going to shaping. Yeah. Okay, so I thought just worth having that conversation in public as well as the discussion we had yesterday. Sarah, thank you very much for that. I can't see any other hands up. again, I'm really reassured by the fact that 6 months ago we wouldn't have been able to have these conversations, and that is indicative of how far this work is progressing. We've discussed and reviewed the progress made and the next steps in supporting the continued development and embedding the trust assurance framework as outlined in section 2.1 of that paper. And we've discussed and reviewed the update to the trust assurance framework dashboard, which was set out in Appendix 1. So I'm not sure who's taking the minutes. If you could note the query, the observations that were raised, and our conclusion at the end, I'd be very grateful. That takes us on to section 3.30. Just a heads up, we're not too bad for time at the moment, but we do need to go to section 5.10 precisely at 12 o'clock. So because Alan Prosser is available at that time. So around about that time, if I need to, I'll juggle the agenda so that Alan can come in at 12. Okay, Kath?
Yes.
Okay. So if we can now then please go to section 3.30, performance management framework. And much of what you were kind of saying earlier, Kath, fits in with this paper as well.
Yes, it does. So I'm going to keep it brief. And I suppose I know that we've had a bit of a moving feast on this to try and provide you with some assurance around the radiotherapy figures. But just to, sorry, bear with me a second so I can get the right paper up, and then I can take you through the performance figures.
So, Kathy, are you talking to this? To introduce this first of all?
Yes, so in terms of the overall performance, you see that we've got the new performance dashboard, and I think it's important to note that. So again, with everything else that we're introducing, we're starting to use this, we're learning how to use it, we're looking at what it actually feels like and looks like. So as we're working through it, keen just to take any comments that everybody's got, and we'll continue to sort of tweak and mature it as we go along. On that front, I'm just going to look to Carl in case there's anything else, Carl, that you wanted to add about.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I just say two short things of the introduction. Yeah. So essentially, yeah, another thing which has come into fruition as part of this overall sort of pieces of jigsaw coming together in the organisation. So the PMF, we've been spending a lot of time doing this, and Martin and Stephen on the call and others have helped to inform this. But essentially, reminding ourselves what we're trying to do is to really follow that golden thread of what does the board need to look at, what do the committee need to look at, and then what information do we need to manage across the organisation, and almost that concept of a desert island. You've got 15 measures of the organisation, what might they be? So that's the first thing we're trying to get to, that sort of golden thread where the triangle. The second bit then is this phase is really about using the information we currently have better. And what we've hoped to got across there, we've started to really focus on the things which we believe matter for the board. And secondly, make better use of the information. So what we've got set out in these charts, we're using SPC to understand what's happening in the system rather than this month against last month. And also, hopefully, it demonstrates not just what's happening, but importantly, why it's happening. If performance or quality is not where we want it to be, what actions we're taking to improve that, by when, and then what residual risk is remaining. So it starts to tie things together, then doesn't with the risk issues, performance. The last bit, just for note, phase 2 is equally important, because what we're hoping to do then is to bring in another range of quality metrics. So bearing in mind, this is based on quality, the 6 dimensions of quality. So things like PROMs and PREMs, and so really going to shape this up to really start to tell us what we need to know about. It's a so what question, isn't it? As opposed to how many you've done, how quickly have you done it? We want to know, so what was the difference we made? So that's really the precursor for phase 2, and Nicola and the quality team will be really involved in getting us to where we need to be. So hopefully it's helpful. It moves us forward. Phase 2 will move us even further forward, and we will also get automations and better analytics as well. So that's what we're trying to do. Kath.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Carl. That was a lot more comprehensive and succinct than Aldrin. So just in terms of the actual performance, the performance itself, I'm happy to pick up on any of the metrics that anybody would like to cover. But there's just a few things I wanted to highlight first. And before I get into either of the divisions, I think it's just really important to note again the performance that the teams are continuing to deliver in the most difficult times and circumstances. Everybody is working so hard not only to deliver the day-to-day service, but also the service ambition, the service change that we've got ongoing. And for the Cancer Centre, obviously including finalising all of the planning elements for the new Cancer Centre. So there is a tremendous amount of work that's ongoing, and people are really going over and above on a daily basis. So just my thanks to all of the teams for their continued work and support for our patients and donors. In the Cancer Centre in particular, we are still running off the tail of the implementation of DHCR, which is a phenomenal change for ways of working right across the organisation. Brings us considerable benefits, and I've already touched upon earlier on some of the challenges that we've had in those early operations and bedding in, and some of the work that we're taking forward in addressing that. So I just wanted to give you an assurance of the fact that we are still working through the implementation, the bedding in, the sort of just going around things again, but that everything is stable. So just in terms of our performance, just to note, our SAP performance is being sustained at target in the context of still variable demand and increasing demand, variable demand coming through from the health boards, and also increasing demand as we see increasing treatment options available for SAT. And there's a considerable number of those coming through, which is absolutely fabulous for our patients. And then we have to turn that into our operational delivery. In terms of radiotherapy, you'll note again that the data isn't there yet, although I do have some January, this is January data. I do have some February data that has now been validated, a limited data set, so that and that's just literally come through to Jazz and I this morning, which tells us that for scheduled care, our performance in February, I know we're looking at January now, but in February, just to give you that, that level of assurance, was 83% for scheduled care, and for unscheduled treatment pathway, it was 75%. The reason I'm only able to give you that validated data is because of the considerable work, the manual work that's now having to be done to validate all of the rest of the data that comes underneath that. But that work is being done, and we will be able to give you a fully formed data set through our next QSP cycle and into the next board meeting. The other thing that I wanted to just highlight is the fact that in January we did see a spike of healthcare acquired infections. These have all been comprehensively reviewed in the multidisciplinary team, and I can confirm that there is no evidence of infection from patient to patient, no evidence of hospital transmission of those healthcare acquired infections. That's all I wanted to cover on VCC. I'll pause there a sec, Chair, if it's okay, just in case there's any questions on VCC before I move on to WBS.
So I'm opening it up for observations. Martin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Kath. I'm looking at the scorecard, so I guess these are general questions rather than specific. Again, my concern is that, hearing everything you just said about how much work is going into this, and how skilled and dedicated the staff are, the columns of red on the right-hand side might cause a reader to draw the conclusion we aren't as good as we are. So I recognise you just mentioned about some of the radiotherapy information not available, and that's 3 of the red X's, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then at the top you just mentioned the acquired infections, and there's 4 for red X's. And again, I go back to this: what does good look like? Is a perfect world, there's absolutely no infection at all. What is our baseline, and what are we measuring ourselves against is the question. We put noughts in here, so absolutely no infection whatsoever. Is that realistic? Because stuff happens. You just use a more polite term, or we actually set ourselves up to fail. We always gonna have red X's because something's gonna happen. So that's kind of a question about if we're setting our baseline in the wrong place, then we're gonna look bad, I guess.
Yeah. Gosh, Martin, there's so many questions in that's really quite broad. So for the healthcare acquired infections, I'm going to come to Jazz and Tina to give you their expert opinion on that. But in terms of the fact that there's 4 different infections, one of the things that when I was looking at the performance framework, I was questioning whether or not our summary data should be whether we have any or not, as opposed to breaking them down by bacteria. So that's a good question, one for us to look at. I think we've done a lot of work to make sure that we've got the right baselines. I think that what we're looking at is, I think we go back to my sort of lean days, runners, repeaters and strangers. And I think the question for us is, when we experience something that's a stranger. So for us, the healthcare acquired infections, we generally have extremely good control over that. And we might see a spike for a couple of months. And then we need to assure you what we're doing about actually reviewing anything that's out of kilter. And so I think it's going to be, I think that's going to be different for different metrics at different times. I think it's something we're going to have to keep working through. But considerable work was done in setting that baseline. A lot of these are nationally prescribed targets as well. So we know that baseline is going there and given. On the healthcare acquired infections, I'm gonna see if I can hand over to
yeah.
Jazz.
I think for the HAIs, they are national targets.
Of course, Northern today is
it's zero tolerance on those.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it's a very strong message of zero tolerance for a very good reason. It makes you run around, work out what's going on, deep dive, do the investigations. We absolutely have to respond in that way. And the reason being that historically we didn't. And historically, these numbers were much higher across the whole of Wales. So, you know, there is a huge amount of activity that supports the space, if you like, in Wales, and how we learn and how. Now, we will always have a risk of E. coli. We've got an immunosuppressed population that we're treating. You know, our C. diff rates. I mean, when I can remember 2010. That's when I set up SCIF. In Velindre, we had introduced capecitabine and we had high rates of E. coli because we had a drug. We didn't fully understand how to manage it, and it was causing stress on the GI system. So there's all sorts of things we can think about historically. So when this happened, I mean, we were all notified, you know, E. coli or C. diff, the one case, because we hadn't had a case for a while. It is about looking into it and could we have done anything different, and possibly this particular case, you know, wasn't necessarily due to our treatments. Patients go through the system, but they come to us and in fact we diagnose it on site. So that was the case for that as well, Martin. You're absolutely right. So I guess that they are red and we have to be accountable for it. But on this one in particular, it is a zero tolerance.
And just for reassurance, I spoke with Nicola previously about the spike in the report, and she was just wanted to offer assurance that they've done a full review and there are no practice issues identified at all. So, so there is the spike, and they're not sure why, but they can just confirm that there were no practice issues identified with the staff at all. You need to consider things later.
That is helpful. And I think one of the things, and this is not by way of an excuse at all, one of the things that national targets don't do is take into account individual circumstances. Yes. And we have always got an immunosuppressed population. Now, in a DGH, there will be some patients who are immunosuppressed, right, you know, but there will be an awful lot of them who aren't. So a national target doesn't take that into account. So we have to benchmark ourselves against and the very, very vulnerable patient population that we have and their risk to some of these. So I do think, despite that spike, I think the level of hospital acquired infection, we have to keep an eye because that went up. So we'll keep an eye, as you say, but it's still a very low incidence. It's a very low incidence. Jazz, was that where you had your hand up? Was you going to respond to that? Yeah, okay. I'm looking around. A couple of questions that I had for Velindre Cancer Centre. Kath, can you have a look under the? You know, you say in the cover paper, you say for performance, you're 1% below the performance target for SACT, but you were 1 percentage point below. I think it's really important to clarify those. Yeah, because it's recorded in percentages. So if it goes down 1, it's a percentage point below.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm a literal grammarian and a literal statistician. It's a curse. Yeah. So that's any other queries on VCC? Thank you.
Okay, so for WBS, again, managing to keep stocks in difficult circumstances, but recognizing there's a couple of things that we're looking at that I wanted to raise with you. One was the platelet wastage. You recall that before we've spoken about the fact that our platelet levels, they're small levels and there's high variability in demand from the health boards, but we really recognise that there's some further work that we can do to look at our data and to look at our stock levels and how we vary them. And so a working group has been established and is looking at that, and look forward to bringing you back progress that makes in forthcoming meetings, and obviously take that through QSP as well. But we're seeing some improvements in our recruitment to the Welsh Bone Marrow Donor Registry, continue to use the swabbing, but also to let you know that we're making good progress with the new strategy for the registry, to look at both our sort of leadership role in the UK and also our activity in Wales. So work is progressing well on that. So I just wanted to update you on that. And then to note that the antenatal turnaround times, which we've been struggling with for a little while, have now turned around and are back to where they wanted to be. So it was just those three things I wanted to highlight for WBS. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody's got.
Any queries for Kath on WBS? Thank you.
Just one really. I mean, we talked about this just to bring to board the stem cells, isn't it? I mean, we're making progress, but still a bit to do, isn't it? So I'm just looking at we're catching up in terms of with divergence. There's still a tiny bit to do. It might just be worth a couple of minutes on thought on that, Kath, in terms of how we're going to go about doing that.
Yeah, so there's a piece of work that's going on to really dig underneath exactly where the world of bone marrow transplant is. And so the Welsh Bone Marrow Donor Registry is really small, but we've always hit above our weight in terms of the number of requests that we have, the percentage of our donors that are actually asked to make a donation. We're part of that network of 80 centres globally, and the search algorithm, if you need a bone marrow transplant, looks right across the world. Now, the reason that we hit above our weight is because our service level is really good. Our staff are really responsive. That hasn't changed. The world of bone marrow transplants has fundamentally changed through COVID. So what we want to know is how much of that global change is reflected in the impact on us as a service, and how much of it is because we need to start to think about, well, actually, are there ways in which we need to be doing things differently as well now as we go forward? So there's a review that's taking place to inform the new strategy that will look at that. Now, clearly, there is an impact for us in terms of our funding, and so we're looking at what the savings that we need to make as a result in the operation are, but we're doing two things in parallel. So yeah, so a lot of work going on with it that should come to sort of fruition, I think, in the next 2 or 3 months. It's also a really exciting area as well, because it's one of the areas, the Bone Marrow Registry, where we're looking at how we can work in collaboration with the Cancer Centre, and how we can look at the bone marrow collection activity through working in collaboration with the Cancer Centre and with Cardiff and Vale as well. So it really is quite an exciting piece of work that we're doing to really sort of take us on for the next 5 to 10 years.
So will you come and talk to us about that in some more detail at some point?
Yeah, and I think either through a board development session initially before we bring it back formally through the governance process for sign-on.
Is Hilary? No, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, right. So Gareth, please.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just in case I've missed it, we used to have scorecards for corporate as well in the data we were provided with. The scorecard that's there now only appears to be for BCC and WBS. Or
no, we got
listed.
14.
No, there is workforce.
There is. Okay.
It's more interspersed, I think, than separate, Gareth. I think that the new arrangement is.
So taking as an example, PADR.
Yeah. Okay.
For example, that doesn't appear there, is it, or by mistake? It is there, is it?
Yeah. It is there.
All right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, we haven't lost anything. Sorry,
All right, so we haven't lost anything. Okay.
Yeah. So can we move on to workforce then?
Let's
move on to workforce.
Jump the gun.
It is there.
Yeah, so I agree, Gareth. Previously, it was a separate self-contained, wasn't it? So now it's integrated. The idea being we can then further triangulate what we're seeing in terms of workforce. So on the high level overview, which is the scorecard, which is on page 12 of 59 and 13 of 59, what you will see is the two, the sickness level and PADR level under effectiveness. So that's the sort of section, effectively, the domains of quality that's gone under. So in terms of the sickness levels, what we can see is it's still tracking at around 6.2%. And so this is the year to January, but even looking at the year to 23rd of March, actually, which is the last cut of the data I've got, we're still at 6.2%. So we're still tracking at that level. I think what continue, I say every time, really, don't I, that we're continuing to look at these numbers as individuals, case management approach, very, very important on that. But what we clearly know is there are systemic factors at play here in terms of our absence levels, and that's something that we are addressing and will continue to address. So a number of the sort of cultural programs and pieces of work, and very importantly, something additional that we're looking at now. There's been a piece of work initiated by an Iron Bevan Health Board, actually, but they start to be we're looking at across Wales around minimising staff harm. So looking at our workforce processes and our policies in terms of the potential impact they have on individuals, on teams, and on services as a result. So, for example, disciplinary policy, and how we might use a different approach, which actually then can actually minimise the harm we do across those individuals, teams, and the service, as I said. So looking at more systemic things that we know do negatively impact, do actually give us absence levels above those which we otherwise should have. So that's just one example of where we're starting to look further deeper, if you like.
That's right. That's really, and if you think of our structured assessment report, which we'll come to later on, they were saying, what we, particularly with staff wellbeing and some workforce issues, is outcomes. We need to be capturing the outcomes as well, and that will feed into that quite well, won't it?
It will, and you're absolutely right. What we know is that we are doing everything we can do in terms of interventions, or we should do then in terms of best practice. But what do those individual things, what difference do they make?
Exactly so, exactly.
As you say, it's those outcome measures which we've not probably been doing as well as we should. Back to the TAF, really, and what I was talking about a little bit earlier on. Of course, it's tougher to do that, but we need
much more challenging.
Also, talking about the sickness absence target, I mentioned here previously conversations with Welsh Government around the target and the value of the target as it relates to us. Just having a further update on that in terms of the fact that they can't stand down that level one, that tier 1 target effectively, but are looking at how we can improve how we use a workforce dashboard nationally, as opposed to that one metric, which really isn't giving us the broader sense of what's actually going on. So a similar idea really in terms of proxy measures that may help us add value. So that conversation is still going on. So I did another conversation about that this week. The other key one here then, as Gareth said, around PADR, so Personal Appraisal Development Review, and what we're seeing then is that we're doing well. So the 77% is actually, it's not the target, but actually it's continuing to sit at that level. We also know that the pay progression policy has now been fully implemented, and what that means, this is something you colleagues may remember me saying for a number of years actually, that as part of a review of terms and conditions with in partnership with trade union colleagues nationally about 4 years ago now, there is a pay progression policy which attaches PADR and performance to incremental steps on the Agenda for Change pay scale. The policy wasn't implemented because of the pandemic, so it was always the intention. It has now been implemented. So we're working very proactively with managers to make sure that they are appraising staff in time that it can possibly affect people's incremental points. So those are things now which are in play, which we are anticipating will push up rates of PADR because there's something attached to that, whereas previously there wasn't a direct link.
So it shouldn't be that shouldn't be the case, but human nature is human nature.
Yes. So that is now fully fully implemented. So obviously happy to take any of the questions.
Gareth, please.
So what we've lost then is the detail of PADR percentages across the different, it is an aggregated percentage now.
Yes, at board level, it's been aggregated up to full trust.
Okay, so what we don't have is, we don't know if there's any failure to do PADRs in corporate, for example.
Should I come in there? I mean, so that's one of the conversations Sarah's flagged. So I guess what we're trying to do, whether we think it's appropriate or not, Gareth, in terms of the trust, they see the sickness absence. I mean, if there's an issue, we would then ask QSP to drill down as actually why are we off, and then we get into where's the actual issue? Is it within blood cancer corporate? So that level you have detail. They're the point of principle we tried to make, and this is Sarah's point. I think some things, where's the risk best managed? So Sarah can't resolve sickness absence in the organisation. That's best managed in the service, isn't it? So we've got a corporate number which is 6%. Then you see in the scorecards of that 6%, 3% would be blood, 4% cancer, 4% corporate. So that's how we're trying to structure the information. So prior to that, it was just one number. So I think there's one more turn, and Sarah has flagged a number of times that we just need that structure. So we'll bring that back in June, Gareth. So you'll be able to see, drill down essentially from a big number, keep drilling down until we get to identify where the hotspot is really.
Yeah, because for those of us that don't sit
Yeah,
at QSP,
exactly, yeah.
you don't get that visibility.
Yeah, fair point.
The only other, not a challenge back, I guess that the other thing we're trying to do is to make sure that the committees do the work on behalf of the board. So we're employee by exception. So that's the other sort of thing we're trying to create.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, please.
Thanks. Question for Sarah. So just on staff absence, obviously it sort of remains stubbornly high. And you know, we all understand the reasons, the causes, and the effects of the pandemic. If you look at that in more detail, I assume that means we've got staff that are on quite long-term sickness. I'm just wondering how we kind of help staff who've been away for a while and help them integrate back into their role when they do come back. Do we have some more sort of granularity around that number? Because I think it's 6%, is it, across the organisation, and it's been that way for a while.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We do break it down in terms of long term and short term. Our long term numbers are not significantly high. I think it's about at my fingertips actually, so I won't say what I think it might be. But however, what we do very actively is manage those people back into the workplace, which I think is the premise of your question. Because when we do return to work planning with individuals, we're very, very keen to either bring them back into their substantive role in a phased way, or actually bring them back into other roles if appropriate, just to make sure that we make the connection, if you like, between the individual and the workplace, because that is a very stressful place to be when you come back in that way. And I think we work in very closely with managers and individuals on that, and obviously taking advice again from occupational health if appropriate, from other wellbeing professionals, to make sure that we help people, because we don't want people to be sitting out there on long-term sick.
Absolutely, yeah.
Disconnected from the organisation.
No, that's reassuring. I understand it's a really difficult and sensitive issue, so that's good to hear about. A bit more about that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Andrew. I can't see any other hands up. We haven't got to this point at a convenient time, in a sense, because I'll finish off this agenda item in a second. I want us to have a 10-minute break shortly, and I don't think we'll finish the finance report. Will we finish that in 10 minutes? We won't, will we?
I'm not spending long on presenting it because the year end is complete.
Oh, okay. So maybe we can, because I'm mindful of Andrew, Alan, Pross having to come in. Oh, David, your hand just popped up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Kath, can I just ask a question under the patient staff experience section? So it talks of percentage of formal concerns responded to within 30 days. Can you just clarify for me, is that responded as in acknowledgement of the concern, or is it responded as in satisfactory conclusion with the patient or donor that's raised the formal concern?
Yeah, it's completed. So there's a target for 48 hours to turn a response around. So if somebody communicates with us, raises something with us, then we have a target to respond to that and to acknowledge it and to tell them what will come next, and to give them an information leaflet within 48 hours. And then obviously a month to fully investigate and get back to them.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. So we have quite a discussion around a number of issues in relation to the performance management report and the framework. And some of that discussion is focused on the new style of the performance management reports, which will continue to be developed by the performance management framework group, as Kath set out to us, taking into account of suggested changes and ensuring ownership at all levels and full engagement with both independent members and CHC representatives, and noting Carl's very important point that what we're aiming to do here is that the heavy lifting, if you like, the work to be done in the committees and reporting then to this board, which keeps us at the right level as a board. So we look forward to that developing as well, Kath. So thank you for the report. We would now have the financial report. 2.40. So Alan wants to come in at 12. If we do finance and then Alan, and then we have a break.
I think finance a break, then Alan, is it?
I don't think we'll have time for that, will we? I'll see how it goes. And
Yeah.
I'll hand over to you, Matt. What's your name, Matt? To do the finance report. Take us through the key financial position and performance for the period to the end of January 2023. And of course, as you just noted, you give us an update on your end as well.
Yes, to say there are 5 KPIs in the paper we've just been through around finance. I know we didn't go through them, but they pull out the 3 that you've got on page 2 of the summary report there, the ones I take you through every month. There are 2 additional ones in the KPIs for the performance report. But these are the statutory targets we get measured against. So you can see for the revenue position, we're still forecasting break-even position. We have obviously the March position, which is already being closed as we speak. And clearly we're working on year-end accounts. So the plan still is that we will deliver a balanced or small underspend position as we do each year. In terms of capital, again, plan is that we will spend fully the allocated funding that we have, which is why the last column there, which is year end, is also green. And then the blip that was flagged also in the performance paper earlier.
Invoices.
Yeah, so the public sector payment performance. So this is for non-NHS. This is what this indicator is about. I think I reported previously there'd been a blip across Wales because there were gaps in our shared services payments team.
Okay.
And so all organisations have seen a reduction in this performance. But as you can see, at the moment, I'm planning on delivering the 95% target by the end of the year, based on the information I have as at today.
The end of financial year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Okay.
where we, this report is very retrospective, more so than normal. It's 2 months behind.
Yeah.
Whereas often it's a month and a half with the timing. Clearly, we're about to.
So it was at the last time you looked at 94.4%.
Close.
So it's very close.
It's close, but I mean, it's fine margin. It's like the decimals count in this game. I'm afraid decimal points, because you can have a couple of invoices that can tip you below or above. So, but the team have been working hard with shared services and forecast. Well, based on what I understand at this point today, is that we will deliver that. So those are the 3 statutory targets that we will be delivering on. The key one, obviously, is the revenue balance that Welsh Government focus on, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I'll just highlight on page 3, and I think I flagged this before, that we did have 2 schemes related to our savings plans in the cancer centre that were redesigning workforce. I guess we knew quite early on in the year that we were looking to probably have to replace those with other temporary schemes, which we've done. So we've met all of our savings target, but just need to be mindful because of the things we just talked about. The really high sickness levels plus the high vacancy runs about 13% if you add those 2 together. Those gaps mean it is extremely difficult to get into the space of reorganizing services in such a fundamental way and changing skill mix and staffing. So those...
Just Mark, in relation to that, what effect is that having on agency spend?
So the agency spend is the low, so that's one of the measures that is the extra target that's not in the 3 in this report, but it's discussed in the report, but it's not in the 3 statutory targets. You went back to the performance report, one of those is the agency. So it's below last year's spend.
That's good news.
But it has crept back up in the last month, 2 months, and that's specifically to do with our estates maintenance. There's a significant amount of backlog work that needs to be done. Health and safety stuff now, statutory stuff. And the team is a limited resource, and we've had to get in some additional agency staff. Kath will be able to tell you this in terms of some of this stuff getting over the line. But we're still below the target for last year. We're nowhere near the sort of levels health boards use.
No, exactly.
But miles off that sort of space.
Nevertheless, that's money. If we don't have to spend it, we shouldn't spend it.
It's a premium. And that's part of the savings plan going forward, and has been this year. We have spent 150k left off the top of my head, or a bit less than that. So that's, that saves on that premium. But ideally, we get rid of the £4 million that we're spending, because there's a chunk of premium cost in there. But ultimately, what we've just talked about, the fragility of the workforce, you can't recruit. Everyone's competing for the same people, so you end up using agency. And there are lots of strategies I know workforce directors across Wales are looking at to try and avoid that, which is, can we get more people on our own bank? Can we get more flexible in how we pay them? Because one of the things people moan about is you only pay us monthly, we want to be paid weekly when we're on the bank. That's the whole point of it. So stuff like that, we've got to get that sorted, because we can't compete otherwise. We just can't get simple. I know workforce directors are working hard because they presented to DOS recently, and there's a whole load of good ideas on this stuff that hopefully will change some of that.
I think Jazz.
Yeah, just to say on this topic, we did have a discussion at QSB committee on it. And one of the points that I did, because there was a question about what proportion of that agency or spend is medical. And actually, it's a very small amount, because we have really tried not to sort of, employ locums for short-term or even long-term purposes, largely because we've done it in the past and we've never been satisfied with the quality or the continuity of care. And so we've really tried not to do it. However, that work and the pressure is being absorbed internally. And I suppose I'm not sure how long we can continue to sustain that. So it's a bit of a word of warning that we may need to look to that as an option to keep the service running. But historically have done it for the right reasons, for patient reasons, have not done it. But we need to look at our staff as well, where they are, and the ability to continue.
That's the big difference between us and health boards. Big medical and nursing. So in health boards, the big areas of agency is medical nursing.
Yeah.
We don't have either. So our nurses fill their own gaps, and our medics do. But the pressure of the gaps across the service may change that landscape.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin, and then Kath.
Kath is probably related.
That's right. Go on.
I was just going to make a general point. I mean, just to recognise the sort of the difficulty of getting to the 3 green columns in the right and helpful are there to where we are. Again, I continue to be. This has been something that's plagued finance for a longest time with capital spend. We spent 14 million in 10 months, and we spent 13 million in 2 months. It's always been like that. We have to try and get away from that, so we sort of schedule. But that's about knowing what our budgets are ahead of time. I'm sorry, that was a general comment. And one specific comment on top of page 3, there's a sentence that says, Just received confirmation from Welsh Government that funding will be provided for the incremental increase in energy prices and COVID response costs. Is that in this current year, recognised with the end of the year, or is that next year?
Yeah, that's just purely for this year. The point of saying that is it sort of leads into something I'm going to say later on, which is we were holding back reserve funding till November. And then obviously when you do that, you know, it's, the window to spend that is difficult, and that creates both a recurrent, so we were holding recurrent funding because we potentially going to need it going forward for energy. But it also means you have non-recurrent saving, because when they dump that money on you, you haven't spent it. You've also got a non-recurrent build-up of funding. And I'll come on to that because there's something I need to say, obviously, in the board about how it manages all that. Sorry.
Mine's going back to the agency spend. So just to let you know that whilst we're tightly managing the spend in some of the areas, and I think the example Matt gave around some of the estates work that needs to be done, you know, we've got no option in the timescale. But for our service delivery staff groups, what we're trying to do is trying to project forward and look at our workforce planning in a different way to enable us to make some decisions upstream in terms of recruitment that will enable us to proactively then preempt and reduce that spend. So to assure you that some of that work's ongoing, but also working with Sarah and the workforce team to just really look at skill mix, making sure that everybody's working at the top of license, and that we can backfill from the bottom with roles that we will be able to recruit and train to try and take some of that pressure out of the system. So there are multiple themes of work that are being undertaken to address both our resilience and also then our agency spend.
So this term working at top of license is one that's becoming increasingly discredited now as a term, and what it should be that people that we've got a competency framework, and that people are trained within that competency framework to undertake the appropriate skills and tasks and so on that they need to do. But there is a growing body of knowledge that this top of license is a discredited term.
We certainly referenced that in our news and
Sorry?
We certainly referenced that in our news and strategy that's about to be published around the right people doing the right jobs at the right time.
Yeah,
You know, so
based on
based
competencies, that would be, and yeah.
To be able to progress in the appropriate way through that competency framework.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, within the nursing workforce, we're going to really try and reinforce that and say that we're doing the jobs that only we should be doing.
Yeah. Thanks, Tina. Thank you, Kath, very much.
I think the phrase, for me, it always goes back to prudency. So I still think the prudent principle absolutely spot on and still applies. So I will not use top of license again. I will use prudent. I'll go back to using prudent.
Look at Alison. It is Alison. Look at Alison Leary. You know Alison. She was in Wales yesterday, in fact. Yeah, and her work on that. Okay, so Matt, have you got more you want to introduce?
This is an important point. So 2.5 under reserves, this is not in the
2.5,
paper.
yeah.
So don't try and find it, but what I'm saying is under reserves in the paper, this is 2 months old, so the paper that we're coming to the next board, which is obviously not helpful, would have a section in it which is describing what I'm about to say, which is because of the late dump of money from Welsh Government for energy funding and COVID response in November.
Yeah.
Created a whole lot of non-recurrent funding this year that we've had because we hadn't committed those recurrent uplift budgets that we got from Welsh Government or the funding we got through our commissioners. We've also had extraordinary bank interest, so we've had significant, because of the rise in interest in the past sort of 8 months, 9 months, about 800,000 of extra income from interest. This is extraordinary. We wouldn't normally be getting this level of growth in our interest income, and also we've had fairly sizable cash balances in the bank account. Those two things together have meant we've got a 1.5 million sort of surplus non-recurrent this year, which to manage that, we have taken the view, and the paper that's going through EFB to read this, but we've discussed this before with a number of people. A holiday period in terms of our recharge against the charity. So normally we recharge the charity a whole range of costs that are agreed, obviously, through the Charitable Funds Committee. And for this year, we are taking a holiday period. A holiday period in terms of the recharge into the charity. And that's also obviously at the point of discussion that went through the Charitable Funds Committee, and we talked about that.
And the consequence of that in subsequent years for the charity
So obviously the charity then has not had that burden of that cost. Exchequer funds that are available
This year.
as a one-off.
Yes.
That just means the amount of resource in the charity is higher than it would have been going forward. So that 1.5 million isn't being placed as a burden on the charity this year. That's all we're doing. And that's something that obviously as a trust we can take as a decision, and the charity can decide to accept that in terms of the trustees. So, and it's the best use of the public funds that obviously the exchequer funds that we've fortuitously have had this year.
Well, the alternative doesn't bear thinking about, does it?
Well, it's just been we would have basically had a huge underspend, but ultimately this is about saying, well, exchequer funds are available as a fortuitous one-off this financial year. We are taking a holiday period. That doesn't mean we're not recharging anything. It just means there's a reduction in the recharge this year compared to what's been approved through the various business cases. I think that was important to share with the board.
Yeah, just on that point, I mean, obviously, given the publicity around Welsh governments having to hand back 150 million, if we had to hand back a penny, it would not go down well. And I think this is a very creative yet entirely legal and proper use of resources.
Yeah, because what I'm saying is, if we didn't have a charity funding up some of these services, then we would either not have the services or we'd be using exchequer money. So it's not anything that is unusual, because every year we can have different business cases that are approved or not approved by the charity to fund various services. So this is simply because we've had a one-off benefit for two reasons I've explained.
Yeah.
The bank interest, which we could not have foreseen was going to be at the level, just because of the way interest rates were changing massively, very quickly and rapidly. And then also, the Welsh Government landing funding late in the year. So apologies. So that's that section. So if you just jump to the COVID section, which is 2.6 and the investment there. So we made investment. You've heard the story before, the history around we invested in our COVID capacity. That cost us 3.5 million. We've been fortunate this year across Wales to have protection on our long-term agreement. So we haven't had to deliver the baseline activity, which is 1920, and that was set across Wales. The baseline year has been the only fair year to use pre-COVID, because since COVID activity has massively dropped in all organisations in terms of the provider arm of each organisation. So this simply sets out that story around we've invested in 3.5 million. The income that's flowed into the organisation would have been significantly less without that protection. So essentially 1.5 million extra income has come into Velindre because we were protected at 90% of the baseline. So we only had to deliver 90% before we started earning more marginal income on top of our baseline. Now, that's fine for this year. So it's left a small shortfall, which we've managed. But going forward from April, if the protection ends, we start the year with a 1.5 million shortfall. However, there's a whole range of mitigating actions around that, or two key ones anyway. There's still a debate across Wales around whether the protection will be partially implemented. So a paper was presented to the DOS, which gave two options: no protection and partial protection at 5%. Majority approved the second option.
Partial protection.
Yeah. So in theory, I'd be sitting here saying to you, everything's fine. We've actually still got some partial protection, which helps, and our demand forecasting that we've worked on with each of the health boards and our ops team has identified the demand growth for the year, which would give us sufficient income, even without protection, to give us a surplus of around 700k by the end of the year.
This is through the marginal cost addition. Yeah.
So
okay.
the marginal income that flows. So even without the protection, we should have headroom if we can deliver the capacity for the demand that we're predicting. With the protection, obviously, that would give even more headroom. The rub here is that one health board, and Nairn Bevan, has refused to accept that majority decision. And so we may end up as a collective in arbitration with Nairn Bevan. So I'm just flagging that now for next year. So this is not a this year issue. It would be a next year issue, but there's a deadline for those arbitrations, which is July. But that would be all organisations affected by this, which should be all of the major health boards and versus an iron bevel. Now that's not the place we want to be in. So obviously we need to have some sensible conversations with an iron bevel around that stance. So it's just probably the final important point. And capital, Martin's already raised the issue. Yeah, we're going to land the position, but it is extremely difficult. You know, the size of the budgets and the big schemes, as you already will know very well from the delays in our major schemes, how that can affect what you can spend. And you can see, you know, in the detail report, the money we've had to hand back to Welsh Government, you know, on our TCS programme. But even so, having handed all that back, there are still, you know, lots to manage in those very major schemes with huge impacts if there's the slightest delay. But we will get there, as I've said. So I think that's all I wanted to say, really. And it's I know I said it would take 10 minutes, but those 2 points were really important, I think, around.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much. So some good news for us. It was plenty of things, good news in there, which is we will meet our statutory obligations. We may just miss, but hopefully not, the public sector payment target. But, you know, that's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I'd rather miss that target than the others, if I'm allowed to say that.
And it is, like you said, it's decimals. So, you know, in a sense,
it's 0.6 or something. Yeah. Is that your hand up, Kath?
No, Secretary. No, sorry.
Who's got a hand up?
We were just liaising on Alan's timing.
Oh, right. Yes. Well, that's what I was trying to make sure I finished it.
No, but he's fine basically for another 10 minutes, so we can have a break. And then,
Oh, can we?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's
Right.
what the gesture
So
was
let me
about.
just wind this up.
The superstar status, Alan, is there.
Whole agenda is circulating around Alan, tell it. So this report has been about the finances to the end of January. So as you noted, it was, so there are some updated figures and consequences to consider. So we note the performance, the financial performance to date, and the year-end forecast to achieve financial break-even. Congratulations and well to everybody. You know, that didn't just fall on us from above. You know, there's a lot of hard work with your team and in the divisions to make sure that we. What?
It's the budget holders, as you were going to say.
Yeah. That's what I was just saying. To make that happen, it was a stretching target at the beginning of the year, and I did worry about it a little bit, but it's come in. So I think we need to. Well, we haven't got the year-end report yet. That will come at the next board meeting. But what from your predictions, we will be there. So that's well done to everybody. And we note some of the caveats about going into next year, Matt, that you've raised with us. So I can't see any other hands up. So thank you, Matt, for that. We've noted all of that. So if we come back, please, at 12:10, and we'll go straight into section 5.1, and then we'll go back through the agenda. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. I need to apologise, Steve, to yourself, because we've juggled the agenda around, and Steve, you've been here since the beginning, I think. So apologies for that. But after we've done 5.1, 3.50 will only take a few seconds to do, and then we will come to structured assessment, etc., straight after that. So hope that's okay for you, Steve. Can't see you there, but I hope that's okay. So if I can take us then to 5.10 on the agenda, and to welcome Alan Prosser to the meeting. Thank you for joining us, Alan. I saw your face; it's disappeared now, but I did see your face there, so I know you're online. So is this going to be a double act, Kath or Alan? Who's going to present this?
I'm going to do a very brief introduction, if that's okay, because I'm absolutely delighted to be able to bring the Welsh Bird Service 5-year strategy, which sits below, and the strategy sits below our overarching trust strategy as well. So, and just to say thanks to the team and to Carl and his team for all of the work that's been done in bringing this strategy to fruition. I'm just really pleased to say that it covers a number of areas. Alan's going to go into that a little bit in a sec. But for me, it's really important that it not only covers our service delivery, our aspiration for service delivery, but also our aspiration for research, which is really important, and also for our system leadership. So I think those three things coming together that really gives us a strong ambition for the service going forward. So with that, I was going to hand over to Alan to be able to present to you and take any questions on the strategy.
Thanks, Kath. Can colleagues hear me at all?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks for accommodating me. I know I've been a bit awkward today with timings, but so it's much appreciated. Yeah, as Kath said, pushing this paper through, hopefully for approval. It's been a number of months in fruition. The cover paper hopefully gives you a flavour for the length and detail of engagement that we've done internally and externally. We've not just tested this with community health councils, we've tested it with donors, and we've actually tested it with the general public as well, which was a request of the Community Health Council when we engaged with them about this strategy. Hopefully it's there and passes a plain English test as well. I think it's really important that it's translatable and that it's an easy read. It was built from the bottom up, and it's gone through a number of passes, and again just thanks to Carl for his support along the way on this journey. So hopefully colleagues can see that we've tried to put the duty of quality fairly front and center in terms of key themes in our thinking and just our triangulation of what we're trying to describe. There's something about how we communicate this. It feels like a perfect storm for me in terms of our futures program is in development, and that will be the vehicle for taking our service to the future. So 5 key programs of work that will sit underneath this, which will include plasma, modernisation of laboratories, Talbot infrastructure, etc., etc. So we don't go into the detail about this. This is about our healthy ambitions for the 5-year future. So we clearly stipulate what our vision for the service is, our strategic themes. I'm presuming colleagues have read this, and I'll have opportunities for questions. As I said, we've mapped the quality domains, which then support objectives, and what we will do and how we will measure our success. So that's what we're trying to bring through. This is currently out in discussion with some commercial providers who've helped address some of the look and feel of the suite of documents under the previous strategies. So when we launch this will look and feel very different. It'll have a lot of pictures, a lot of visuals, and we're just considering and discussing that with the commercial company that has been used previously to get this launch right for the service. So it feels like a launch April, May today, and I'm obviously just really grateful for the support and the exercise that we've been through, and hopefully colleagues are happy following some questions to approve and support this at a board level for the service. I'll probably just draw a breath there, having presumed that people will have read this in terms of the detail of the ambitions and the 7 strategic themes that are written out.
Thank you, Alan. Did Kath, do you got anything to add to that?
No, that's fine. I think Alan's covered it. Just keen to take any questions that anybody's got or observations.
Sarah, please.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just to thank you very much, Alan, for the work that's gone into the development of the strategy. And clearly, as you see, the engagement has been extensive, and I think that's reflected in the way it's presented. Specifically, you know, obviously, as you'd expect, just in strategic theme 7, and the fact that you've pulled out there, for me, all of the key things we need to do across the whole organisation, actually, and having the WBS perspective on that is very, very important as one of those key pillars of the work that you're doing going forward. So thank you to you on the team.
Thanks, Sarah.
Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that we had a good discussion regarding this at Strategic Development Committee, which I know is shown on the paper itself, but we were happy to endorse it there.
Yeah, thank you for that helpful reminder. Alan, this is something that I didn't see this until it came to Strategic Development Committee, and I don't think I was at that committee, so I read it sort of in absentia, as it were. So apologies if I'm raising something, you know, and you've come to the end of a process. But donors cease donating sometimes, right, because they develop a health condition which precludes them from being able to donate in the future. So either, you know, they might be on anticoagulants, or they develop a condition, or whatever it is. And I have to say, the way in which they exit the service is very sympathetically done by your staff, you know, and I've heard people say to me that the blood donation team will say, it's time now, you've looked after us, you know, by donating your blood for this many years, it's time now for us, for you to be the one that's looked after, and it's done very sensitively. So absolutely no complaints there. But I've spoken to a couple of people who want still to be involved. So they can't donate blood anymore. Is there a contribution on a volunteer basis that these individuals can give to the Welsh Blood Service? And is that something that you might contemplate, if not in this strategy, going forward?
Yeah, well, that's perfect timing to introduce the fact that we're developing a donor strategy. So there's something about the engagement, the recognition, the reward, and the recruitment of donors into our service in the future, which sits underneath this. And something within that strategy that we need to consider is, what does either a donor panel or a citizens assembly look like? What do advocates for our service? What's our community footprint? So I think reaching out to wider than just the donor community will be absolutely critical in terms of the way we shape the service going forward. So I think it's in our thinking, it's to be developed. It will again come up the chain for approval, and we're going through the second draft iteration currently, and just kicking that amongst ourselves as a service, as a senior leadership team currently. But I take the point in terms of the way we let people go, but the fact they still want to help and support us, and I don't think we should lose that opportunity when times are stretched and times are difficult, in terms of people freeing up their time and feeling connected to the service.
Yeah, I think that would be very welcome among a number of people, and this would fall then into the realms of volunteering. And I think it is an important social capital thing, you know, that we do afford individuals the opportunity to volunteer. So I got the hands are racing up now, so I'm very grateful for your response. I wasn't quite ready to start singing if there hadn't been any hands up, but now we've got plenty. So Andrew, Hilary, and then we'll come back to Kath. So Andrew, please.
Thanks, Alan. I said this at strategic development. On each of the strategic themes, it looks like you're going to add a pie chart. It says quality domains use pie chart highlighting. I suggested you don't actually need a pie chart there. I think this is part of giving it a bit more colour and a bit more figures, but I'm not sure a pie chart's the right thing there. Under the measuring our success, again, wasn't quite clear, because there's lots of percentage recruitments or percentage of occasions. WBS had to import blood, percentage increase in donor pool. None of those have numbers, so I'm assuming there's those targets, quantified targets, are still to come in another iteration of this. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I mean, fundamentally, what will be the cornerstone of measuring this will be a refreshed PMF. So, you know, we've got a PMF that has come out in a different look and feel, but we're going around to say, you know, what are the real markers that are important for our service going forward? And I think developing this strategy has helped us do that. So there will be some absolute clear markers that will need to be agreed and supported, and will come through, obviously, committee board discussion. And I take your point on the pie chart. I'm looking for, I'm looking for better visuals than a pie chart, really. So I'll take that on board as we go through the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you. Hilary, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alan. I mean, mine is going to be a general comment, and it won't be a surprise to anyone to say that I'm linking it to values. We don't link any of our strategies to values. And if we want to change the culture of the organisation as a whole and to get a theme that goes across the whole organisation, we have to start linking it to our values. So I know that those are currently under review, so I will probably hold off, but I hope that the next time we see a strategy, the same goes for the IMTP, that it will also link it to values. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Kath, please.
Yeah, so very quickly, just going back to what Alan was saying this morning earlier about the donor strategy. Part of that, we're going to mirror what we've done for the patient engagement framework in terms of having a donor engagement framework. And in fact, Alan and I earlier on this morning had a discussion around how we actually start to go out with some focus groups for donors to try and shape that and understand and bring that donor voice to it. So just to note that there will be that parallel donor piece.
So those people who have donated for many years and then now they can't because they've developed cancer or they've developed whatever it is, they would be very helpful because they've got a lot of experience, haven't they?
They will, and we will have a focus group to do that. And in fact, what we were talking about this morning was not only about having the focus groups, but how through having these focus groups we teach our staff the skills to have further focus groups in future. So so that piece of work is currently being scoped.
Thanks, Kath. I've got one other. Well, I've got two. Research features in this 5-year strategy, which I'm very pleased to see. I know Andrew West will be pleased to see it as well. We're keen to avoid there being two very distinct research strategies because there's so much which will, there will come, so much infrastructure stuff in relation to research needs to happen across the trust. So, and same for innovation, actually. So I'm just wondering if a link, Alan, can be made to, yes, there's got to be specific programmes of work which are particular to the Welsh Blood Service, and they have to be taken forward. I absolutely get that. But when it comes to research capacity building and so on, that is something that could be, that's part of a trust-wide initiative. So just to signal or to signpost that whatever research and innovation strategies are developed becomes part of a, also there's part of a trust-wide strategy which you'll be involved with. Jazz, do you agree with that?
No, absolutely. And I think we've been doing quite a lot of work, as you're aware of as well, Chair, on the committee, on the IDNI committee, in trying to bring the two divisions together. And we've succeeded in our kind of performance reporting. There's much more sort of, recognition of a similar thread running through that piece. And I think the strategy is the next step. We've got a date in the diary in April to actually focus on this, to get the kind of wider engagement around the RD&I component, and to look at where there is alignment, but also the focus that is needed on WBS.
Yeah.
And to make sure that we are committing to that.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
It's got to be both. There's going to be programs of work which are specific to WBS, programs of work which are specific to the Cancer Centre, but then there are other programs of work which research capacity building, research infrastructure, IP, etc. They need to be cross-trust.
And I think Edwin, in his role as well, is going to help some of that. He's focused on it.
Yeah, very much so. So I think Edwin brings a very different lens for the service in terms of the opportunities that do join up the two divisions, and as well as some of the points you just raised, Chair. So that will come through, I'm sure, in the following months.
I'm very pleased to note, that you're going to make it, do everything you can to make it possible for any donor to donate. That's clearly set out very early on, and I think, giving blood is a form of gifting, and what that does to people's psychological health, etc. We've had this discussion a number of times, Alan, and I'm glad to see that it's there front and centre. So I was very pleased to note that. Now, unless I missed something, and I might well have, there's some big strategic developments that Welsh Blood Service is looking at in the coming year, 2 years, one being plasma for fractionation, and the other one being zero carbon and stuff. You've got that, but the sort of building developments that are going to take place to make the building zero carbon and fit for purpose going forward.
Yep.
Was it not the intention to put specifics like that in there?
Yeah, that's I almost see that as a layer down behind that ambition. So that is almost as I try to describe at the front is we'll have a WBS Futures program, which will be the vehicle which will manage what I'm seeing as 5 key activities alongside 2 digital programs. So almost 7 activities, I suppose. So we'll be having infrastructure development, as you said, in terms of our ambitions for the site and for the infrastructure and for the carbon neutrality. There'll be the modernisation of laboratories, which will sit alongside that, and that is a cultural piece as well as a potential movement piece, but actually looking at workflows and improvements that we need there, and obviously digitally enabling us will realise a lot of those ambitions, certainly within transplantation. We will have collection modernisation and the new clinical model for collections, which will be fairly front and centre, as alongside the Plasma for Medicines programme as well. So those are really key pieces of work which will emerge, I'm sure, through the Strategic Development Committee discussions. And as I said, this strategy is there to then help us just perfectly time the launch of those programs into the service and bring the staff with us and bring the board with us and the executives with us in terms of joining up the ambitions. So hopefully, so it's a level below, I suppose, this strategy, but the detailed work behind there will come through Strategic Development Committee in terms of the way we're shaping up our programme for the future.
So that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I didn't understand that from here, and I think one sentence in there which signposts or signals that there's more to come underneath, enabling strategies to come underneath. That would be very helpful, so we know that that's coming.
I could add that would be easy enough. That's a good comment.
Yeah, that's just one sentence. It'll take you 2 seconds to think about something to add.
I've already typed it.
So in relation to, I can't see any. So we've noted the engagement activities to date and note how thorough and wide-ranging they have been. And we note that it's been to Strategic Development Committee where it was endorsed, which is why it's coming to this board for approval. So colleagues, I'm asking you to approve, subject also to the underlying strategies which Alan has just outlined, that we approve the WBS 5-year strategy 23-24 to 27-28. We're all content. So thank you, Alan, very much for that. And thank you for giving us a bit of leeway so that we could have a comfort break.
Well, thank you for accommodating me. I know it's not easy, but that's much appreciated. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon all.
Bye-bye. Bye, Alan. So if we can go back to 3.5, we'll be on track then. We'll be doing things sequentially. So this is the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee highlight report, which, Jazz, I believe, in Vicky's absence, you're going to just speak to. Yes. We'll do that next, please.
Yeah, so you can see from the highlight report, it's fairly comprehensive, as it was a very useful meeting with lots of discussion and lots of content. I think that there are 2 main themes that I want to draw your attention to. One which features in the alert and escalate box, which is around sort of business intelligence and the ability for us to draw on information in an appropriate way to make the right sort of conclusions around quality. And the second one, which we've already touched on, is around the workforce. So we did have quite a lot of discussion around the requirements that now have changed, really. We've got the duty of quality coming in. We also have the medical examiner's service, both hitting the 1st of April 2023. And whilst we are currently meeting the statutory requirements of the medical examiner's service, it has allowed us to take a good focus on what we're doing around mortality. And in fact, there are, national data sets now requiring us to report on 30-day mortality. The duty of quality, it also has a number of features that we need to report on, but also the triangulation between issues such as consent, incidents, clinical audit. How do we do this effectively? And so we want to flag the fact that there is a need for us to focus on how do we do this? How do we get a sort of system in place that allows us to draw on the information to make then the necessary judgments and triangulations. Now, it's not to say that we're not doing that currently, because actually we are in a number of areas providing very good quality data. However, largely that data is manually collected, and it's also collected by clinical staff in many cases. So, on the one hand, we're talking about the workforce pressures. This sort of focus would allow us to relieve some people from doing that manual activity and allow them to actually focus on their clinical requirements. So we are, I suppose I've got two hats here. On the one hand, I'm presenting you with the problem, but on the other hand, there's been lots of discussion that we're having, and Kath may want to say a few words on the fact that we've collectively agreed that this is a priority for us to focus on, and we would look forward to bringing you back something which tells you about the progress that we can make in this area. And it's not an easy one to fix overnight, but we absolutely think the benefits will be seen in many areas if we can pull this off. So Kath, maybe a little bit on the kind of maybe the next steps for it.
Yes, so I'm glad to be able to tell you that considerable work is already underway in terms of looking at all of our quality indicators to try and create a quality dashboard. And a piece of analysis has been undertaken with staff from WBS and the Cancer Centre working together with the BI team to actually go through each of those and to identify where they're currently manual, where DHCR for the Cancer Centre actually now gives us a new opportunity. It's one of those additional benefits it brings. So we will be able to capture delayed transfers of care and the mortality information in DHCR now going forward. So there's a mapping exercise, and I think what we've identified is that a substantial amount more work will be done, and we'll bring an update paper through the next QSP cycle to give an update on that. But we're anticipating that what we'll be able to bring you then is a breakdown of what we've got, what's automated, what we've still got to collect, and our anticipated actions to enable us to collect that digitally. And that's what we'll get back to you in QSP in April or May. I've lost it. May. QSP.
So the other point which we have touched on is the workforce, but the sort of focus was really on the ability to deliver the service requirement through the current workforce model, remaining as a risk, and the transformation that's needed across the multi-professional workforce. And I suppose we were sort of, discussing a kind of plan for that with some target dates that would be helpful to try and bring back to the next meeting. And I know there'll be a focus on the medical workforce coming to EMB on the 17th of April. So some of this work is already underway. I think the only other thing I wanted to point out was the fantastic donor story that we had. I don't know if Alan's still on the call, but we received a video donor story in relation to genetic hemochromatosis. And that is an example of where we have increased the access to donations. So the population of Wales with hemochromatosis, hereditary hemochromatosis specifically, can donate blood more frequently. So that was a good news story, really.
It's a good news story, because when I first joined the trust, that wasn't happening at all, and was one of the things, the challenges I put to Kath, and you were in the Welsh Blood Service then. So that is really good news.
Thank you. So that's all I have to say.
Oh, thanks, Jazz. It's a very busy committee. Quality Safety Performance is a very busy committee. Well, and because it tries to triangulate quality finance workforce, it is a very busy committee. So any observations, queries for Kath, for Jazz? I didn't attend the last Quality Safety because that was the day of the Health Minister's away day with the chairs. So it's one of the committees I really enjoy the last, because of my my particular background. So thank you very much. So we note, having discussed that report, and I need to go back just to my agenda here. So this is the report from the March committee, Jazz, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
16th of March.
So that's well done to get that ready for this reporting cycle. So we're bang up to date. Thank you. So now we come to section 4.1, Audit Wales 2022 Structured Assessment and the 2022 Audit Annual Report. This is led by Katrina February, Kate Febrian, and Steve Wyndham. Hoping Steve is, I can see Kate is still there. I can't see Steve. Have we lost Steve Wyndham?
Let me check with him. I thought he was on the call still. What we can do is go to the performance part of it.
Yeah.
So
in your hands, Kate.
Yeah, Steve's coming back on now, so I'll sort of start with the performance side of it.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is talk about the annual audit report. Essentially, it sort of summarises work that we've undertaken in 2022 in terms of what we call our performance work, or the reviews that we've undertaken to consider the trust's arrangements for securing efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in the use of resources. So we've got 2 reviews. So the first one is our review into the trust quality governance arrangements, and we reported that back in August, and we said that significant progress had been made to improve the trust quality governance arrangements. At the time of our report, the new quality and safety framework had just been agreed, and so work remained at that time to put into place those new governance arrangements, and also then to embed them into practice. But we did recommend, and I think I'll draw attention to perhaps the main areas where we made recommendations, where we said that we thought there could be improvements made to the information contained in the risk registers being taken to meetings, both operational meetings and to board committee meetings, to support better scrutiny of those risks and to get underneath the issues and have proper discussion. So that was our work. Obviously, there were a number of recommendations, and we will sort of follow those up and see what progress has been made over the next few months. Our second review, which reported much more recently, and that was our structured assessment review. So that was agreed this month, and so that report is also contained, summarised in the annual audit report, but separately as a standalone report in the agenda papers. And we'll also come back and sort of have a brief discussion at that in audit committee next month. So just to sort of highlight the main findings there. In respect to the governance arrangements, we found that the trust has a good governance and leadership arrangements, and these are supported by improving systems of assurance. The board and its committees, we said, were operating effectively and are actively using learning to drive improvements through. We did find some opportunities remain to improve the public availability of some key papers and documents. And as I said, extensive activity to renew and strengthen sources of assurance. And our finding was that once fully operational, these should provide good coverage for the board to enable the board and its committees to assess and improve operational performance and effectiveness. In respect of managing financial resources, we found the trust has effective arrangements for managing those, but does face several risks to maintaining that financial sustainability in the medium to long term. In respect of managing the workforce and digital resources and the estate and other physical assets, we said that the trust has clear plans in place to support staff wellbeing, harness the benefits of digital and improve its estate. But the arrangements for monitoring and reporting those outcomes required some strengthening, particularly in relation to staff well-being and digital. And by that, we're talking about whether it is reporting whether the intended benefits have been achieved, which I'll come back to in a moment. So the last section was in respect to strategic planning, and we found that the trust had clear strategic intent supported by good planning and stakeholder engagement arrangements, but there were some opportunities to enhance those delivery reporting arrangements. So again, we're coming back to that theme of outcomes. So we said that the IMTP, for instance, has clear objectives and actions, and which are supported by sort of timescales for delivery of those actions. But we feel it would be beneficial to also set out what is the intended outcome of those actions. You know, what is it you're setting out to achieve, so that it's possible then to sort of not only measure that the action has been completed, but that the desired outcome or intended benefit has also been achieved. And where that's not the case, this then allows you to sort of change course of action, or to see, you know, if further actions are needed to get the benefit that you wanted. Finally, we said that the IMTP progress reporting is effective, but they could be improved by giving more assurance as to what the trust is doing when delivery of an action is off track. So there are a few recommendations that are arising from the structured assessment report. Separately, the trust have provided their response to those recommendations that we made. I don't intend to talk through those. I think we'll probably talk through those in more depth in the audit committee next month. But we will monitor the progress to address those recommendations over the coming months. I would like to just take the time to thank the staff for the help and cooperation for during the course of all our work in the year. But I'm happy to take any questions on the performance elements of the work now, and I'll also check that Steve's on the back in the room if you'd like to take to talk you through the financial part of our annual audit report too. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. We'll search for Steve in a minute. So Kate has set out the performance aspect of the structured assessment. You note in your papers that the management response is there as well, and that's Kate, what you're saying is, you know, that will be reviewed in some detail at next audit committee, and we need to track, you know, that we are we're on track to deliver the responses that that we've set out. So does anybody want to raise anything with Kate up to this point? Tina and then Carl, please.
Some reassurance really. So page 6 of the structured assessment, we noted that there's been some impacted by the pandemic in tracking all our recommendations from external inspections and regulatory bodies. So just to confirm that is going to be back on track, it will be reported through our integrated quality and safety group and then through QSP. So we're picking that back up now. So just for some assurance to the board.
Thanks, Tina. Thank you. Carl, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I mean, just a couple of sort of comments really in terms of welcoming the report. I mean, I know we've been back and forth debating the apostrophes, but they're incidental, aren't they? But I think the broader point for me, it does accurately capture where we are and the progress we've made over the last couple of years. But importantly, also, I think it aligns with the plans that we have in place to go forward for the next couple of years as well. What's been interesting throughout today and the various committees is the sense of triangulation in the things that we're trying to do and how they come together. So taking away all the report kit, I guess there's 3 or 4 things which we're trying to focus on. One has been a bit smarter, being far more precise, and then really focusing on the so what. And that's sort of featured in our conversations throughout the various committees. So I think it does absolutely align with with the things we've set out as our next steps as well. So extremely helpful in that regard. So just say thanks for you and your team for going through that with us.
Thank you.
So, and whereas, you know, there are recommendations and we take them very seriously, and the management response reflects that we take them very seriously, and we will track that. I hope I'm not too bold in saying that, you know, this is a very reasonable account of our governance arrangements in this organisation. I take great comfort from what's been reported here in terms of our governance arrangements. Oh, my battery's running low, as just said. So thank you, Kate, and thank you to everybody that's involved in everybody that was interviewed and, you know, and was open. I think everybody was open, Kate, in relation to responding to the queries and so on. And we are a learning organisation, so this is a report that we take seriously and that we will be working towards delivering the objectives, the recommendations that have been set out in it. Oh, thank you. Apologies, colleagues. My battery's... Just 1 second.
Yes, if I may, Chair, I concur. It is a positive report, as you said, and I suppose some of this has taken the tack that we could sort of say, well, that's good enough, but we also want to push you to, you know, always push you to be better. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly the spirit in which we've received it. Pardon? Oh, Hilary, your hand is up. I didn't spot it, Hilary. I do apologise. Before I was just finding out, Hilary.
No, that's fine, Chair. And I don't know whether this is the time to raise it or not, because I appreciated that it's been said that the recommendations and responses will be discussed at the next audit committee. But I just wanted to sort of understand or make my comments aware, because I'm not a member of that committee, that in, for example, R1, we're talking about timely papers being published in a timely manner. I just wondered whether or not there is a need to expand and explain what timely means when you're considering, or maybe audit committee will pick that up. I know we're only noting the responses here, we're not approving them.
Yes, I'm more than happy to speak with the team on that. We didn't specify times just because there's different types of documents, papers, etc. Contained within that recommendation, so the timescale would be different. But yeah, more than happy to have that discussion.
Oh, did you just want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add that it's going back to my old language. It's a operational control failure as opposed to a design control failure. So
yeah,
the way in which the procedure and guidance for our teams is laid out is clear. So there isn't anything we need to change in that. It's just making sure that it's consistently followed. And so what we are doing is, as well as supporting the team in, or the teams in reviewing that guidance again, making sure everyone is clear, technicality, is there's a further check now each week to make sure that everything that we expected to be loaded has been loaded effectively. So it is clear in the process.
So Martin and I are eyeing each other up here, but presumably papers will be published on the website as soon as they are shared with board members.
It should happen simultaneously.
Yeah. So
and then,
it's not a criticism, but it's not rocket science, and it's just a question of process.
And that's the point being made, actually. Yeah, the process is, the policy or the procedure is in place, and it doesn't. So we haven't got to write a procedure to get this right. We're just going to make sure that it happens.
But it's dependent on timely release of papers to board members.
Well, there's that as well.
Yeah, but that isn't an issue in there. So it's
but Sorry, Chair, but it is an issue, isn't it? Because we don't always get papers in a timely fashion, and sometimes that's unavoidable. So if today there were papers flying in today or late last night, the chair and the chief exec's updates arrived this morning for me. The private papers arrived earlier this week, clearly not in 7 days. So you're right, Lauren, we have a policy, we don't adhere to it.
Yeah, and we can do the compliance rates. We did it before, it's sort of over 95%, but yeah, we can track that.
Okay, so in relation to the structured assessment, we note the content of the structured assessment. We welcome the recommendations and the feedback and the levers that gives us to learn and improve. And I'm just wondering is Steve there now to talk to the Audit Wales 2022 Audit Annual Report? Is he there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your patience, Steve. I did apologise earlier.
I heard your apology.
Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I've gratefully received as well. Thank you. And not a problem. And apologies from me as well, because my attendance has been very erratic. So I'm in another meeting at the same time, so I'm jumping between the two. So apology from me in regard to that. That said, there's not a great deal for me to say. Kate has already covered the performance audit aspects of our annual audit summary. But what I will tell you, talk about briefly today, and just for the record, as much as anything else really, is talk you through some of the financial audit elements, our key findings. As I'm sure Kate said, sorry, I've got apologies, I've got a little puppy here attacking me. It's all happening. As Kate said, this report is really much just a summary of our audit work last year. Sorry, I'm sorry, this is very unprofessional. A summary of our audit work from last year, from 2022. Kate has covered the performance audit elements. Now I'll cover the financial audit elements. It's very brief, as I just said, and there are just 3 key messages, really, to be quite honest. And they are positive. The findings are positive from a financial audit view of the world of the trust. First things first, it was an unqualified opinion on your accounts, which is obviously good news. It doesn't happen every year, for all bodies. So it is something to to celebrate. It's not a given by any means. There's a lot of hard work goes into that from the trust. So that's the first thing to communicate. And the second aspect then is we didn't identify any significant control weaknesses at the trust in terms of how the trust operates in terms of its financial arrangements. And the third message is that whilst we did qualify our regularity opinion, this, which is not something you probably, would receive with any great appetite. But the point I want to make here is that was in common with many other NHS Wales bodies. It wasn't unique to this particular Velindre, and as you well know, it's in regard to the clinicians' pension tax issues and the related ministerial direction. So it's not a reflection in many ways of how the trust operates and how the trust conducts itself. It's part of a wider sort of wider matters, and in terms of how the trust has been captured really in regard to that issue. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So it's been a long time coming, I guess, in terms of waiting to communicate this. But as I said, it is very brief. So I hope that sort of captures the main level points within the audit summary report. But I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Can I just ask one quick question, and then I'll open it up to everybody else. Does the last budget that was announced, will that regularise the clinicians' pension arrangements that have led to the regulatory note that's in the account? Will the last budget sort that out?
There's two particular angles on this. One of which is the budget update in terms of what the Westminster government have announced. And secondly, the Auditor General's view on this can change anyway, and this is under review. And as I understand it, I don't want to sort of, I don't think a final decision has been made yet on this, but it's the direction of travel is that it's probably unlikely to be a qualification this year, a qualification that is in terms of a regularity opinion. But what I would say is that is just a direction of travel. It's not a formal confirmed view yet. It's just my expectation in terms of how discussions are going internally on that at this particular stage.
Steve, thank you very much. Just for that, Martin, looking to see if anybody, Martin, please.
Thanks for that. I think a couple of things are just to sort of challenge, I guess, some of the narrative there, Steve. You said it's nice to have an unqualified opinion. We always have an unqualified opinion. The one exception was when Audit Wales were unable to audit stocks, so we won't need to go back in that, but that's the only time we've had a qualified opinion here in my time here. So
yes.
We do have a long record of being unqualified, and I think that's helpful to note that. The ministerial direction stuff again came out later in the day, and I don't particularly want to go into that. And again, say we're not unique. We're not unique amongst Welsh health bodies. However, Wales is unique across UK bodies in terms of putting this qualification in place. Yes, I've gathered that the Auditor General may change his mind for 22, 23, and of course it'll disappear for 23, 24 onwards. But yeah, it's helpful just to we use the right language to describe this stuff. We are an organisation which has always had a clean set of accounts and an unqualified opinion, except for that one exception last year.
No, that's what you're saying is factually and entirely correct. The point I was making about it's not a given wasn't in regard to this trust, to be perfectly honest. It's just in terms of the wider sort of health sector, public sector in Wales, or indeed any organisation that might be subject to audit. It's not something that's a given, an unqualified accounts, and it's a reflection, I guess, of the hard work that was put in terms of preparing those accounts. You know, and the good quality draft accounts we had. So, but yes, I very much agree with your points, Martin, and you know, no further comment from me really. So,
thank you, Steve, and just as to concur with your final remarks there, Steve, perhaps Matt, you could pass on our thanks to the team that have worked so hard to put the accounts together and work collaboratively with Audit Wales. You know, again, this doesn't fall on us from above. It's a reflection of the hard work of lots of people throughout the organisation, and particularly in your team, Matt.
I'll pass on thanks, and they'll be particularly welcome because they're working hard as we speak on the next set of accounts.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, okay. I can see the steam coming through the window as I arrive in the morning. So thank you, Steve, for that. So we're asked to note the recommendations in the 22 Audit Wales structured assessment. I would also add to that we note, please, the organisation's response to the recommendations and the actions that we've agreed that we're going to undertake to deliver on those recommendations, and to note the Audit Wales 2022 Audit Annual Report, recording my thanks to the team. Thank you. So we come to a really big item now, which is the Integrated Medium-Term Plan, and Phil Hodgson has joined us for this. We had a very detailed discussion on the Integrated Medium-Term Plan at Strategic Development Committee. So we've had a thorough going over of this, and there have been a number of issues that we've asked Phil, you and the team, if you could include in the IMTP or refine or modify, whatever it would be the right verb to apply to that. So bearing that in mind, Phil, I'll hand over to you. Or is it Carl, you're going to do it, yeah?
Yeah, I think I'll just provide feedback on those changes have been made, and we tried to summarise them.
Well, that's what I was, yeah.
The amendments were taken on board.
So thanks, Phil. I mean, as I said, I'm not going to go back. The paper's there for everybody to see people have had a chance to read. I think there is a set of slides which make.
Leanne's lined up for help.
I don't mind. I think what we're going to propose to do, we agree with the committee, is literally just walk through the 100 pages in about 10 or 12 slides and just focus on really pertinent parts and support that. So thanks, Leanne. If we just move on to the next one. Yeah, I mean, that's the agenda. With a bit about, we just talked about getting the QA done, context, and we're focused really on 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? And Matt will take 2 minutes on 6, which we've discussed. Thanks, Leanne. Just by way of context, keep moving, Leanne. We'll correct all the detail. Yeah, so just to be clear, I think the important context in the paper says this is not a new plan. This is a refresh of our existing plan, which was approved last July. So it's important we take it in that context. The second point I just wanted to make really was strategic alignment is still sound. And the third thing we focus on in this particular plan is really ensuring the core service we provide around blood, cancer, so on and so forth, really achieve high quality safety and experience standards. And the second element of the plan is delivering on our transformation program. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say in terms of the opening remarks. I just wanted, perhaps Kathy's going to take us through a couple of slides on cancer and blood, the key points. Matt's going to pick up finance, and then we're happy to take any outstanding questions. With Sarah, I do apologise, Sarah, picking up on the most important thing apart from patients and donors is our staff, so the workforce. I do apologise, I'm trying to do hastily without thinking. So, Kath, if we just pop on to the 2 service plans, some key points, and then we'll move forward.
So thanks. I said, Carl, as you noted, a refresh of our existing plan. But I think the refresh is really important in terms of the way that we've taken that through. And it really has been clinically informed. We've had a considerable number of meetings throughout both of the services in terms of going back to our staff, how things are with the plan, and nuances and priorities. So I think that's really important to note. So I'm going to take you through the cancer service slides first, being really careful to use the words cancer service rather than the cancer centre, because I think it's important to note that the core element of where we're going in that next phase now is the enablement of the delivery of a regional approach in a way that is now, is now more relevant and more important forever. And just the development work that's been done in more recent years around some of our programmes, including the AOS, is now coming to fruition. We've aligned. You'll note that. Sorry, can you move us on, Leanne? Thanks. You'll notice that that we've set this in the context of Wales Cancer Strategy and the cancer quality statement for cancer. But also we've articulated it in the context of the ministerial priorities. So we've aligned all of the things that we're going to do against those priorities that we'll continue to be reporting to Welsh Government. And I also think the important thing to note is as we go through each year, we're getting closer and closer to the time that we'll move to our new premises. So really starting now to look at what that trajectory and that horizon looks like, and how we start planning our transition, both in terms of what we would need to do for that physical move, but also thinking about the things that are enabled by that, thinking about the things that we need to do before that time. So considerable work undergoing in terms of how we plan the service change and the integration of some of the digital changes that we need, and also keenly underpinned completely and utterly by the developments in the workforce. So major programmes, big major programmes such as Radiotherapy Satellite Centre, IRS, but also ambition for service improvement and service development right through all of the services. So there's some detail in the next few slides that we can just touch upon, and hopefully the deliverables in planned care then indicate that some of the big improvement projects as well, so such as Radiotherapy Satellite Centre, as well as the service improvement ambition such as the brachytherapy that we touched upon earlier on today. Next slide, please, Leah. I've already touched upon the importance of the digital agenda, and I don't think we can underestimate the size of that programme of work. Next slide, Leanne. I think we could probably. The other thing I think it's really important to touch upon is clearly our new requirements under the Quality Act, and in terms of really making sure that we're very firmly stating in the MTP what our ambition is in relation to quality, and focusing on some of the service changes that we're taking forward through the Trustwise Safer Care collaborative work with Improvement Cymru. And you'll see the details of there, two really important pieces of work that we're doing, not only because these pieces of work are important, but also because the methodology that we're using expands our capacity and capability in terms of some of the skills that we require for the future. So next slide, please, Leanne. So in terms of some of our challenges, we know that we've got increasing demand coming through the system, both in terms of the increasing incidence of cancer that we're seeing, but also from the new opportunities, the new lines of treatment that are now available for our patients that are continuing to come through the pipeline. And the opportunities that we're taking in terms of being able to make sure that we're able to meet that challenge, being really clear about that horizon scanning and that co-production of our service models. I know the workforce that Sarah's going to touch upon in a moment, but really key for us is some of the development of those practitioner roles. We also touched earlier on around working prudently, and I think that is a key theme through each of our pieces of work that we're creating a focus for. And finally, and not least, is the financial savings target that we've included, and that's £1.5 million, and we're working with the finance team on identifying all the savings schemes for that. So moving on, so I'm happy to take any questions anytime if anybody wants to interject, but I'm going to move on now to WBS. Okay, so for the WBS plan, again, a refresh, and for the bottom up, taking feedback from all our staff. Demands aren't going to change very much for the next 12 months, and minimising wastage in the supply chain is going to be really important. I think that's all self-explanatory there. Could you move on to the next slide, please, Leanne? And Alan mentioned earlier on the 5 major programmes in the that are going to sit under our Velindre, our Welsh Blood Service strategy. Those 5 programmes are there as our key priorities. I don't think there's anything specifically to pick up from there. I think that's all quite self-explanatory. Sorry, just the final slide then, Leanne, which again, the Safer Care Collaborative, we've previously mentioned that. And again, the service development in value-based healthcare, which I think is really important to mention, giving us an opportunity to bring that whole sort of value-based healthcare piece of work not only to the Cancer Centre, but also to the blood service through the piece of work that we're doing collaboratively with the health boards on preoperative anaemia. I think that covers. I think that just covers off the high-level things that are included in the plan. But as I said, I'm more than happy to take any other questions if anybody's got, or any other comments.
Is it worth us picking up workforce finance, and then we just take it as a piece? So is that okay, Chair? We'll just quickly whip through the last couple, and we'll take it as that'd be helpful.
Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please, Leanne. So we've got 3 slides here, and as we'd expect, the detail around the workforce and OD work is contained within the divisional plans. What we do then within the workforce and OD section is really just provide that high-level overview of how these align under our people strategy, which is what you can see here under those 6 themes. And moving on to the next slide, not wanting to repeat other conversations we've had really, because the conversations we've had today around workforce are exactly these in terms of the priorities. And then on the last slide, we can see what we're doing is presenting the challenges which we're addressing through detailed plans which sit underneath this document really. I'll hand over to Matt then.
Next slide, please, Liam. Right,
Oh, can't believe that.
That's probably not a presentation, is it?
Yeah.
So if it's a presentation, you'd be able to read it. Because obviously I checked that when I produced them. So the only important bit you can't read in the box is we're submitting a balanced IMTP, which is a balanced financial plan, based on a whole range of assumptions. The risks are set out later on in a table, risks and opportunities. So there's around £3 million worth of potential risks, but there's also 2.5 million of opportunities. So, you know, as you'd expect, I've set a balanced plan based on a whole range of assumptions, and throughout the year we will manage those risks and mitigate them. Next slide, please. I'm not going to take you through any of this. This is essentially the detailed plan in terms of, well, not the detailed plan, it's a summary of numbers should you wish to discuss any out of this meeting with me, and it sets out the key assumptions. So next slide, please. Okay, this is the savings. So one thing I would want to draw out is at the moment, one of the risks we've identified is that we have got plans against the target for savings of 1.8 million. But at the moment, there are £800,000 worth of savings where the plans are not fully worked up. So we have £1 million where the plans are fully worked up with timescales, leads, but the divisions are still working on the other 800,000. So I thought it was important to just flag that, but it's also flagged in our risks table later on. Next slide, please. As I said, this is the detail of those risks and opportunities. So I'm not going to take you through them. I'm sure you've read them. And the savings is one of those I've flagged. Next slide, please, which is the capital slide. So the only thing to just tease out on this one again, which is in the box, you can't read it. We have a significant amount of all Wales capital schemes, as you know, that are still in train in terms of FBCs being developed for submission to Welsh Government. Not least the new cancer centre, Welsh Blood HQ costs and the plasma fractionation. So it's just highlighting those that are not yet.
So that's the plan, Chair. So happy to take questions.
So just getting a bit of context right. So this has been TMB. It has been to it's been generated from the bottom up. Went to strategic planning committee last week. It was endorsed subject to certain changes. Got assurance from Phil that those changes are now present. And so if we approve it today, it's submitted to Welsh Government tomorrow, which means we meet the deadline.
Yeah.
So that would be the plan. So if there are any residual observations, Gareth, please.
One general and one specific comment again. At Strategic Development Committee, what we were given assurances that for subsequent years, there would be more time, there'd be a more ordered timetable so that there was an opportunity for review with the possibility of changes being made by that committee and also board. So just to note that Phil, I think, is going to be preparing that and bringing it back to us in due course. The specific point, Matt, is in relation to your best case and worst case scenario. There's quite a big swing there, about 5.4 million, I think.
Yeah.
And I just, and it's too late for now, I guess, but it would be nice to narrow that down, really, the difference between best and worst case. But because it's a big tolerance factor, isn't it?
Obviously, as we go throughout the year, you should expect that gap narrows. Like now, the report, obviously, clearly for this year, is saying, well, there are no risks left because we've mitigated them all. Otherwise, you'd be worried, wouldn't you? I get some of these will fall away. You know, when we get more certainty, for example, on the national funds flow, which is out within my control completely, but that, you know, has a massive impact on some of this risk as well. We're going to have protection around our income, for example. The savings one is very much, I flagged this down to getting those plans in place. I still got confidence, even if those particular plans don't come to fruition, there are other things we can do. So I get your point, but I suppose on the 170 million total budget, you know, it's within the realms of what I'd expect to see at this point in the year. I suppose the most important thing is I'm given, hopefully, confidence that we've got a balanced plan going into the year and we can mitigate most of those major risks, I think, for the opportunity presented there. And the other ones that come up, as you know, throughout the year that I haven't foreseen. I mean, there'll be risks as well. We're used to managing this.
To that, Phil, you've taken on board, as we discussed in the Strategic Development Committee, about wanting to have a bit of a more leisurely pace. And just so we're not on top of things, but it came to Strategic Development Committee last week as in its final draft, which wasn't a lot of time for us to make our comments, get them changed. It put pressure on you guys as much as anything else to make the changes in a very quick turnaround time.
Taking on board, people will go into the executive team in May, setting out the process for next year, but we'll build in much more lead time for comments and feedback.
I just want to make a point in that. Just an organisational response. Back to Lauren's earlier point, the process was clear. We're going to be more disciplined and stick into the process. So.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair too. Tina?
Just one point. I think I'd ask me to mention as well is just ensuring that our goals are clearly aligned to the work of the Safe Care Collaborative, like I have mentioned on the slide, that is clear within the IMTP.
Well, I missed the first part of that.
That our improvement goals are clearly aligned to the work of the Safe Care Collaborative, and I know Kat had included that in the slides, isn't it? But just to ensure that that's referenced in the IMTP.
It is, you know, I mean, make sure that it's, yeah, Nick has mentioned that. Yeah.
So I don't know if you could help me. One of the issues that we discussed at some bit of detail at Strategic Development Committee is inclusion of diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
I can't easily find it.
So this version hasn't been changed, Chair.
Apologies.
So can update.
To point out, the data of the committee was also the data submission to the board.
Okay.
And I'm all in version 27. Sarah has sent over those amendments.
Excellent.
Policy diversity, we have some specific actions as well.
So that's in the version that you've got there. So we are reading the pre-Strategic Development Committee version, is that right?
No.
No.
An iteration after that, but we can send this one around for completeness if the board would find that helpful. And if even more helpful, point out, for example, the page where that features.
I think we would like that.
I know we do need the final version.
Yeah. Can it be possible to do that today, please, Phil?
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. So again, you know, I'm mindful of the huge amount of work that goes into developing this plan. And it was the case that the new template was to make it a bit more streamlined. It doesn't feel like that. It might be, but it doesn't feel like it was has been more streamlined. It's just the same amount of work. So we're asked to approve the IMTP for submission to Welsh Government on the 31st of March, together with risks to the delivery. But we will there will be final QA in to make sure that any editorial issues are sorted out. But a condition of that approval is that we get circulated with the absolute final version, Phil. And if you can point out where the changes have been made, that would be really helpful as well. So what we're actually saying is we approve the IMTP for submission to Welsh Government on the 31st of March, following final quality assurance. That final quality assurance includes editorial and us seeing what changes were made post Strategic Development Committee.
Okay, great.
Is everybody content with that as a way forward? Gareth, you happy with that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. And so the next item on the agenda, I'm mindful of time running away from us, is the Q3 update on the existing IMTP.
Yeah, so we're happy just to take questions. The paper self-explanatory does also pick up the conversation with the Quality Committee about being more specific about when we're not on track, and picked up Katrina's point here as well around the structured assessment. So I think between us, we're just happy to take questions. This is Q3. Q4 has been prepared as we speak, and we bring that forward I think in June.
Yeah, because Q4 is upon us, isn't it?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah. So thank you, Carl. Are there any observations, queries or questions in relation to the Q3 report on the IMTP? Oh, Martin.
It's a generic point really, Carl, you've already got to this Q4 coming. Obviously in the right-hand column, there's lots of green, but it obviously isn't all green, and there's some big red things in it as well. That point about more explanation of whether Q3 means that we have failed for the year would be helpful. So is it recoverable? Well, I think the red means no, it's not. So I think some analysis of that, and if Stephen were here, he'd say, is it a miss by an inch or a mile? Because that's important as well. Or that quantification really of the kind of so what factor, because on the face of it, towards the bottom there's a bunch of green, but at the top there's an awful lot of thick stuff which isn't green. That's a kind of concern, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a point being made in the structured assessment, is the relationship between the input, the output, and the outcome, isn't it? So being clear. So yeah, we agree. And some of them, yeah. So we need to understand it better, I think, is the challenge, Martin, and that's what we've committed to do in this next sort of cycle. So green tide.
Any heads up on Q4 then, is it, as we speak? So it's a little early to say everything's magically turned green.
I'm not going to speculate, but I mean, I think the other thing we should take some comfort from is the performance management framework and some of the other triangulation around clinical audits, everything else. It comes together as a piece, doesn't it? So that's the thing we do need to better connect them. Sorry, I think Jazz.
Did you have your hand up, Jazz?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I think just picking up on Martin's point, I think there are a couple of things which are read from our progress report, which we are also, which we have picked up on in terms of radiotherapy, ability to participate in clinical trials, in internal mammary nodal radiotherapy implementation. So we flagged those, they are there and they remain red, and we do need to make progress on them. But we are, we have identified that, and there's pieces of work that I know the Cancer Centre are doing to help us make progress on that. So, it's a valid point that those things that are red are important, and they're on our radar.
And will it be like there likely to be much change for the Q4 report, Jazz?
Yeah, well, we've made some changes, but whether that will, I think that they may take some time for them to come through. So there should be an updated plan on what we're able to do with this, with the timeline. But I can't say that we wouldn't have implemented internal mammary by Q4. But I know there is a plan to do that in a phased approach.
Okay, so I'm looking around. So we note the progress made as of Q3 in delivering the key trust actions included within the approved IMTP for 22-23. So that's that item. Thank you very much. 5.4 is building our futures together, the project initiation document. So we've been hearing about building our futures together for some time. So Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce this item. Thank you.
Just mindful of the time, Chair, just if I can just mention one or two key.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Sarah.
This Building Our Future Together portfolio initiation document, that it really sets out a number of points which we've had in a number of conversations with board colleagues across the last 9 months, really, in terms of pulling this approach together. And what we've done here is pull pieces of work under an umbrella of Building Our Future Together, which together will give us a bedrock for the delivery of our Destination 2033 strategy. And that's a very important, alignment, isn't it? Some of which are process, some of which are cultural. And very much today we've talked around the elements of cultural change, which we know we want to see and will support through various elements of work. So what you can see within the PID are how those things are pulled together under 11 areas of work, which are led by colleagues across the executive team, and will come through our various governance cycles in their own right. So we will see a lot more detail reflected then in what those things actually mean, what they will deliver, and how we will measure the impact of their delivery. So I'll leave that there, Chair. It's clearly outlined in the cover paper and obviously in the longer PID document. But clearly, Laura and myself are working very closely with Steve on this. Very happy to take any questions or comments.
So thank you, Sarah. Can I just ask before Hilary jumps in? I'm sure she will in a second. Project 3, which is values and culture. You're the exec director lead for that, but we as a unitary board will work with you and colleagues to develop that particular project.
Absolutely, and it's very timely. So our next board development day on the 18th of April, we actually have a section on culture and a separate section on values.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will fully engage once again, because we've gone around the cycle once around the values with board colleagues. We'll be coming back and actually doing a piece of work together on that date, which will then take us to the next stage in finalising those values.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other questions? It's good to see this come to the board as a PID, so that we can see how the whole begins to come together, because it's been a kind of bit of a conversation in abstract, if I might say so. Don't mind me saying so. So it's good to see it coming together like this. Are there any queries for either Sarah or Lauren in relation to this? because we've been asked to approve this PID document. So if not, I move that we do approve it. And could I ask you, Sarah, how the reporting, as it's a PID document, how will the reporting, if you can just remind us how that's going to work?
Absolutely. So on page 14 of the PID, we've actually laid out the role of the Executive Management Board, SHAPE, in terms of oversight and guidance, and then the Strategic Development Committee will receive update from the individual programmes and overall achievement.
So that's clear. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we now come to the consent section of the agenda. And I'm asking if colleagues, does anybody want to remove anything from consent and bring it into an agenda for discussion?
I'd like to make one comment regarding the chair's urgent action report. That's all.
Which number is that? 6.1?
6.1.
Oh, the first one.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's take that now then, Gareth, please.
The only comment I was going to make, Chair, thank you, was in each of the urgent actions, we list who's recommended urgent action. And we do say that a number of supplementary queries were raised following board approval. Now, historically, we used to name the independent members that had raised the query. And I'm just keen to understand why we seem to have moved away from that. And that now it's it doesn't indicate who's raised a query. And I think that's also true of the minutes as well. That I'm not suggesting we go back to the minutes, but the same approach has been adopted there. And sometimes it's keen to have that visibility. It's helpful to have that visibility and transparency.
I think that one of the issues was back in the day was either you note you note it for everybody or you note it for nobody, because sometimes you would have Gareth Jones raised X, Y, and Z, and then later on it was raised that. So either we have it for everybody or for nobody, and what do colleagues feel about that? That would mean every comment that is raised by IM or our officer colleagues would be attributable to an individual.
Is it because there were a number of that we haven't done this thing? If there was one query raised by a person, you might have named it, or is our policy changed? I guess that's the point. If there's lots of, I understand there would be a long list, wouldn't it? If 10 people raise queries, you'd have
10.
You'd have a page of those.
From a purely selfish perspective, I'm keen to be recognised that independent members are sometimes challenging those urgent actions and are performing a proper scrutinising role, if you like.
Okay, I think that's more helpful as a way of contextualising it, and I think that's something we can go away and take a look at, Lauren, as to how we
between executive and raised by an IM or raised by an exec.
I mean, for the urgent actions, it's only IMs. But it's making it attributable to which IM, because the execs don't comment by definition because it's already been approved, and they can't comment basically because they can't approve it.
Okay. I just do, as I say, I was keen to understand why we changed the approach to it.
In the report, I don't know. I'll pick it up with Emma. It wasn't something we've consciously discussed.
So rather than speculate now, if I can note that concern, and I'll pick it up, discuss with Lauren and Emma, include you in what we do. But we need to, if every IM asked a question, it would, because sometimes we write, and there was a lengthy discussion, the following queries were raised, and then you put the queries in.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay, Gareth, so I undertake to liaise with Lauren and Emma to do that for you.
Thank you.
So, but in relation to the report itself, that's fine. Thanks, Gareth. The National Imaging Academy of Wales hosting agreement extension. We're asked to approve the extension of the hosting agreement. The National Academy for Wales. Thank you. And there's a number of trust-wide policies. Anybody want to pull any of the policies out? We've got the Charitable Funds Investment Committee policy. We've got the counter fraud. We've got intellectual property, IPC, the policy for the prevention and control of transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, CJD, minimising the risk of transmission. And we've got the ionizing radiation safety policy. So unless there are any queries, we're noting the policies. And then 6.22, these policies have been approved elsewhere in the organisation and we're noting them. And then 6.22 is to trust the affixing of the common seal, as it's called. So we're noting the affixing of the common seal since the last board meeting. And then we come to the highlight report. So we've got 6.2.3, Transforming Cancer Services Programme Scrutiny Subcommittee. We note that, unless anybody wants to raise anything. The Strategic Development Committee highlight report of the 7th of February. We note that, unless there's any, no. Thank you. Audit Committee highlight report. Thank you, we note that. Remuneration Committee highlight report. We note that. Local Partnership Forum highlight report. Note that. And the Welsh Health Specialised Services Committee joint committee briefing, where we're asked to note the contents of the public briefing dated the 14th of March 2023, which sets out the key areas of consideration and aims to ensure everyone is kept up to date with what's happening in Welsh Health Specialised Services. Thank you. And then 6.29, NHS Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, which we're noting that. I was just thinking, we normally have the chair and the director to a board meeting annually. I don't think we've had Neil. We decided not to do it.
No, they came to a board development.
Yeah, they came to board development.
No, we haven't had them at a board meeting, but we probably should.
Probably should, as they come to annual report time and so on.
Yeah.
So we can think about that. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah.
I think that complete. Oh no, we're doing it. That concludes all the items under consent. The date and there's no one. I haven't been informed of any other business, so I'm presuming that there is none. The date and time of the next meeting is the 25th of May, and so just before we do close, I just want to ask colleagues if anybody wants to raise anything in relation to any of the items that we've discussed on today's agenda. There have been a number of suggestions for improvement in ways of working, ways of presenting papers, which we will take on board. I'll make sure that with Lauren that they're captured and that we address those. But does anybody want to raise anything now in relation to any of the agenda items that perhaps they missed the opportunity earlier in the meeting? So if not, I propose we close the meeting and we adopt the resolution that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of this meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest in accordance with Section 1(2) Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, paragraph 67. So we break for lunch, come back just after 2 o'clock, please. Lunch today is provided by the catering team from Velindre Cancer Centre, led by Sue Shepherd-Murphy, our Trust catering lead, and we've invited Phil Hodgson and Peter Gorin, who've been, if I pronounced that right, or Gorin, who've been instrumental in developing the new performance management framework and the IMTP, to be joining us for lunch. Today marks Chris Davis's last day with the Trust as she's retiring. So we'll say something outside. Chris has provided support at Trust headquarters the last 8 years. She will be greatly missed, I have to say. She's been an important colleague, friend, and she's been like a mother to us as well. She's been just amazing. So we wish Chris a long and happy retirement, and we'll say so outside.
Yeah.
So thank you, colleagues. And if we could come back, I'm going to say come back at 2 because other people, I'll be back in here at 2 as people join. But if you need a few minutes extra, then I'll allow you to take that. But I'll be back here at 2.
Thank you.
See you shortly.